The stagecoach didn't even slow down. Eliza hit the ground hard, shoulder first, then hip, then face. The impact knocked the air from her lungs, left her gasping in the New Mexico dirt while the wheels rattled away into the distance. Dust settled over her like a burial shroud. She didn't scream. Couldn't. Her throat was too raw from 3 days without water, her lips cracked and bleeding. She just lay there, tasting copper and earth, listening to the echo of hoofbeats fade into nothing. This is it, she thought. This is where I die. Above her, the sun hammered down, merciless, absolute, the kind of heat that made the air shimmer, that turned the landscape into something hostile and surreal. New Mexico in July. Hell with better lighting. From somewhere nearby came voices, murmurs, the shuffling of boots. Christ almighty. Is she dead? Should we? Don't touch her. Might be diseased. Eliza's fingers twitched in the dirt. Her eyes cracked open, just slits against the glare. And through the haze she could make out shapes. People. 12, maybe more. Standing in a loose semicircle, staring down at her like she was livestock that had dropped in the street. She tried to speak, managed only a wet, rasping sound. She's alive, someone said. A woman's voice, sharp with disapproval. Barely. What do you suppose happened? Look at the size of her, probably couldn't fit inside anymore. Driver must have gotten tired of the complaints. Laughter. Not cruel, exactly, just casual. The kind of laughter that comes easy when you're looking at someone else's misfortune. Eliza closed her eyes. The shame burned hotter than the sun. She'd known this was coming, had felt it building for the last 100 miles, the way the other passengers shifted away from her, the driver's increasingly hostile glances, the whispered conversations that stopped when she looked up. She was too big for the cramped interior, her body pressing against the woman beside her, her weight making the suspension groan. She tried to make herself smaller, hunching her shoulders, pulling her arms in tight. Hadn't mattered. 3 days ago, in Santa Fe, the driver had told her straight, "This ain't working, ma'am. You're going to have to make other arrangements." She'd begged, actually begged, told him she had nowhere else to go, no money for another coach, a teaching position waiting in Silver Ridge that she couldn't afford to lose. He'd relented, barely, with the understanding that if there were any more complaints, she was out. There had been more complaints. So here she was, dumped in the dirt outside some nameless trading post, miles from anywhere, with nothing but the clothes on her back and the sure knowledge that she deserved every bit of this. "You're too much," Victor used to say. "Too big, too hungry, too demanding. You take up space that isn't yours." And she'd believed him. God help her, she'd believed every word. "Someone ought to get her out of the road," a man said. "She's blocking traffic." "What traffic?" someone else muttered. More laughter. Eliza felt hands on her arms, rough, impersonal, and then she was being dragged sideways, her boots scraping furrows in the dirt. They deposited her against the side of a building, propped her up like a discarded sack of grain. The wood was hot against her back, but at least it was shade. "There," one of them said. "That's better." The crowd began to disperse, back to their business, their lives, their certainties. Within minutes, she was alone again. Eliza let her head fall back against the wall. Her vision swam, dark spots crowding the edges. Dehydration, probably. Maybe heat stroke. Maybe just the body's way of saying it was done fighting. She thought about Victor, about the last time she'd seen him 3 months ago in that rented room in Albuquerque, the way he'd looked at her. Not with anger, but something worse. Disgust. Like she was a problem that had finally solved itself by leaving. "You think you can make it without me?" he'd said. "You think anyone's going to want you?" She'd left anyway. Taken the last of her savings, bought a ticket west, answered an advertisement for a school teacher in a town she'd never heard of. It had seemed like escape, like possibility. Now it just seemed like a different kind of trap. Time passed. She wasn't sure how much. The sun moved overhead, shifted the shadows. Her head pounded. Her mouth felt like sandpaper. At some point, a man approached. She heard his boots first, slow, deliberate steps that stopped a few feet away. "You hurt?" The voice was low, rough-edged, careful. Eliza forced her eyes open. The man was a silhouette against the sun, tall and lean, hat pulled low. She couldn't make out his features. "I'm fine," she croaked. The lie tasted bitter. You don't look fine. Then why ask? A pause. Then something that might have been a laugh, dry, brief. Fair enough. He crouched down, bringing himself to eye level. Now she could see him, weathered face, maybe 40, with lines carved deep around his eyes and mouth. Not handsome exactly, but solid, real. The kind of face that had seen things and survived them. Name's Caleb Monroe, he said. I run a ranch about 10 miles north. Eliza said nothing. You got a name? Does it matter? Might if you're planning to die here. Ought to know what to put on the marker. Despite everything, Eliza felt the corner of her mouth twitch. Eliza Hartwell. Well, Miss Hartwell. Caleb tilted his head, studying her. You planning to die here? Hadn't decided yet. Mind if I make a suggestion? Depends on the suggestion. Don't. The simplicity of it caught her off guard. Not you shouldn't, or that would be a shame. Just don't. Why? She asked. What's it to you? Caleb was quiet for a moment, his gaze steady. Then he said, I've seen plenty of things die in this territory. Animals, mostly. Cattle, horses. Sometimes people. And I'll tell you what I've learned. The ones that survive aren't always the strongest. Sometimes they're just the ones too stubborn to quit. You saying I look stubborn? I'm saying you're still breathing. That counts for something. Eliza wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, that breathing was just biology and didn't mean anything at all. But the words wouldn't come. She was too tired, too empty. Caleb stood. I've got a wagon around back. I'm heading home in about an hour. There's room if you want it. I can't pay you. Didn't ask you to. Why would you help me? He looked at her for a long moment, then shrugged. Maybe I'm just curious to see if you're as stubborn as you look. Then he walked away, boots crunching on gravel, leaving her alone with the choice. The wagon was old but sturdy, the kind built to handle rough terrain and heavy loads. Eliza sat in the back, wedged between crates of supplies, watching the trading post shrink into the distance. Nobody waved goodbye. Nobody even looked. Caleb didn't talk much during the ride. Just sat up front, reins loose in his hands, eyes on the horizon. The silence should have been uncomfortable, but it wasn't. It was just there. Uncomplicated. The land stretched out in every direction, vast, empty, beautiful in a harsh kind of way. Mountains in the distance, purple-gray against the sky. Scrub brush and red earth. The occasional twisted tree clinging to life against all odds. Eliza had grown up in Missouri, where everything was green and close, where you could walk for 10 minutes and find a neighbor. This landscape felt like the opposite of that. Like you could scream and the sound would just disappear into all that space. How long have you been out here? She asked, surprising herself. Caleb glanced back. 12 years? Came out after the war. Which side? The losing one. He said it matter of fact, no bitterness, just truth. You fight? She asked. Some. You miss it? No. That was the end of that conversation. They rode on. The sun began its descent, turning the sky orange and pink, casting long shadows across the desert. Eliza felt her body relaxing incrementally, the tension draining out of muscles that had been clenched for days, maybe weeks, maybe years. She must have dozed off because the next thing she knew, the wagon was stopped and Caleb was saying her name. Miss Hartwell, we're here. She blinked awake, disoriented. The sky had gone purple, stars beginning to emerge. In front of them stood a house, simple, sturdy, built low to the ground with thick adobe walls and a covered porch. Lamplight glowed in one window. This is your ranch? Eliza asked. Part of it? The rest is out there. He gestured vaguely at the darkness. A woman appeared in the doorway, older, maybe 60, with iron-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked at Caleb, then at Eliza, then back at Caleb with an expression that clearly said, "What the hell is this?" Martha, Caleb said, climbing down from the wagon. This is Miss Hartwell. She'll be staying with us for a while. Martha's eyes narrowed. Will she now? She needs food and water, probably medical attention. And what makes you think I'm running a charity hospital? Nothing. I think you're running a household that has extra room and a Christian obligation. Martha snorted. Don't you dare bring Christianity into this, Caleb Monroe. That's a low blow and you know it. But she was already moving toward the wagon, her movements brisk and efficient. She looked Eliza over with a clinical eye. Can you walk? Eliza tried to stand. Her legs trembled, barely holding her weight. I can try. That's not what I asked. Then no, not really. Martha sighed, a sound that conveyed both annoyance and resignation. Caleb, help her inside and don't you dare drop her. I just cleaned those floors. Between the two of them, they got Eliza into the house and settled in a chair by the fireplace. The interior was simple but comfortable. Wooden furniture, woven rugs, shelves lined with books. A room that had been lived in, cared for. Martha brought water first. Sip it slow. Too much too fast and you'll just bring it back up. Eliza obeyed, the cool liquid like heaven on her cracked lips. She wanted to gulp it down but forced herself to take small swallows. When did you last eat? Martha asked. 2 days ago, maybe 3. What'd you have? Jerky, some bread that was mostly mold. Martha made a disgusted sound. No wonder you look half dead. She disappeared into what must have been the kitchen, returning with a bowl of soup, something with beans and vegetables, simple but rich smelling. Eat, she commanded. Eliza did, and it was the best thing she'd ever tasted. Not because it was fancy, it wasn't, but because it was food, warm and real, and offered without cruelty. Caleb had taken a seat across from her, his chair angled toward the fire. He wasn't watching her exactly, but she could feel his attention, quiet and assessing. So, Martha said, arms crossed, you going to tell us what happened, or are we supposed to guess? Martha, Caleb said, a note of warning in his voice. What? She shows up half dead in the middle of nowhere? You expect me not to ask questions? I expect you to give her a minute to breathe. I've been breathing for 35 years, Eliza said quietly. Both of them looked at her. It hasn't gotten me very far. Martha's expression softened just slightly. You running from something? Someone. Husband? The word hung in the air. Eliza set down the spoon, her appetite suddenly gone. Might as well have been, she said finally. We weren't married, but he had ideas about ownership. Caleb's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. He hurt you? Martha asked. Eliza looked at her hands, broad, capable hands that bore the faint scars of a dozen small injuries. Burns from cooking, cuts from sewing, the permanent callus on her right middle finger from holding a pen. Not the way you mean, she said. He never hit me. Didn't need to. There are other ways to break a person. The room was quiet except for the crackle of the fire. I met him in St. Louis, Eliza continued, not sure why she was talking, but unable to stop. I was teaching at a girls' school. He was charming, attentive, said he'd never met a woman with so much intelligence and spirit, made me feel like I was special. She laughed, a bitter sound. Took him about 3 months to start changing the story. Suddenly I wasn't intelligent, I was pretentious, not spirited, stubborn, not special, just difficult. And the whole time he acted like he was doing me a favor by staying, like any man who could tolerate me deserved a medal. Son of a bitch, Martha muttered. I started believing him, Eliza said. That's the worst part. I looked in the mirror and saw what he told me to see. Too big, too loud, too much. I made myself smaller, quieter. It was never enough. So I left. Good, Caleb said. It was the first word he'd spoken in several minutes. Eliza met his eyes. They were dark in the firelight, impossible to read. He came after me, she said. Twice. First in St. Louis, then in Albuquerque. Both times he said he forgave me, that we could start over. Both times I almost believed him, but something in me, some tiny stubborn part, said no. What changed? Martha asked. I got offered a teaching position. Silver Ridge, about 40 miles from here. It's not much, one-room schoolhouse, barely any pay, but it's mine. My name on the contract, my classroom, my chance to prove that I'm more than what he said I was. And the stagecoach? Caleb asked. Eliza felt the shame rise again, hot and choking. I didn't fit. Too big for the seat, too heavy for the springs. The other passengers complained. The driver got tired of it, so he dumped me. That's illegal, Martha said sharply. You paid for passage. I'm sure there's some clause about excessive weight or disruption of service. There always is. Martha made a disgusted sound. People are bastards. Some of them, Caleb agreed. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. But you're still here, and you've got a job waiting if you can get there. If, Eliza echoed. I have no money, no transportation, and even if I could get to Silver Ridge, I'm supposed to start in 2 weeks. Look at me. I can barely stand. Then you rest, Caleb said simply. Stay here, eat, sleep, get your strength back. When you're ready, I'll take you to Silver Ridge myself. Eliza stared at him. Why would you do that? Why wouldn't I? Because I'm a stranger. Because you owe me nothing. Because you deserve a chance, Caleb interrupted. Same as anyone. The simplicity of it left her speechless. No conditions. No expectations. Just help. Freely given. Martha cleared her throat. I'll get the spare room ready. You'll stay there. Meals are at dawn, noon, and sunset. Don't be late or you don't eat. There are chores to be done around here, and once you're well enough, I expect you to contribute. We don't take charity, and we don't give it. Understood? Eliza nodded, throat tight. Understood. Good. Martha stood, brushing invisible dust from her skirt. Now finish that soup and get some sleep. You look like death warmed over. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out onto the desert. Eliza sat on the edge of the mattress, hardly believing it was real. A bed. Sheets that smelled like lavender. A door that closed. Safety. When was the last time she'd felt safe? She couldn't remember. There was a knock on the door, soft, tentative. Come in, she said. Martha entered carrying a bundle of clothes. These were mine, back when I had more flesh on my bones. They should fit you well enough. She set them on the bed, a simple dress, undergarments, a nightgown. Thank you, Eliza said. Martha waved it off. Don't thank me yet. You haven't seen me before my first cup of coffee. She turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. That man you were with, she said, not looking back. The one who broke you down. He tell you that you were worthless? Eliza's breath caught. Yes. He was wrong. Martha's voice was matter-of-fact, like she was stating the weather. Men like that need someone to feel small so they can feel big. It's got nothing to do with you and everything to do with them. You remember that. Then she was gone, the door clicking shut behind her. Eliza sat in the silence, Martha's words echoing in her head. She wanted to believe them, wanted to let them sink in and take root and change something fundamental. But belief was a muscle she'd forgotten how to use. Still, maybe that could change too. She changed into the nightgown, soft, worn cotton that felt like luxury against her skin, and lay down on the bed. The mattress wasn't soft, but it was clean and level and hers for the night. Through the window, she could see stars scattered across the black sky like spilled salt. You deserve a chance, Caleb had said. Same as anyone. Such simple words. Such impossible faith. Eliza closed her eyes, and for the first time in months, slept without fear. She woke to sunlight and the smell of coffee. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Then memory returned. The trading post, the wagon, Caleb and Martha, and a kindness she still didn't understand. She dressed slowly, her body still aching but functional. The clothes Martha had given her fit reasonably well. A little loose in the shoulders, a little tight in the hips, but serviceable. She braided her hair, splashed water on her face, and made her way to the kitchen. Martha was at the stove, stirring something in a cast-iron pot. She glanced up when Eliza entered. You sleep? Like the dead. Good. Sit. Breakfast is almost ready. Eliza sat at the rough-hewn table. A minute later, Martha set down a plate. Eggs, fried potatoes, thick slices of bread with butter. More food than Eliza had seen in a week. I can't eat all this, she said. Then eat what you can. Caleb came in from outside, dust on his boots, sweat already darkening the collar of his shirt despite the early hour. He nodded at Eliza. Morning. Morning. He poured himself coffee, sat down across from her. For a few minutes, they ate in silence, the comfortable kind where nobody felt obligated to fill the air with noise. Finally, Caleb said, How you feeling? Better, Eliza admitted. Sore, but better. Good. When you're up for it, Martha can show you around, let you know what needs doing. I can start today. You can start when you're ready, he corrected. No rush. But Eliza shook her head. You're feeding me, housing me. I should earn my keep. Martha snorted. Stubborn, just like he said. I didn't say stubborn, Caleb protested. I said determined. Same thing. Not even close. They bickered like that for a while. Easy, familiar, the rhythm of two people who'd known each other a long time. Eliza watched them, something warm and painful blooming in her chest. This was what a home looked like. Not perfection, just partnership. Respect. After breakfast, Martha gave her the tour. The house was bigger than it looked from outside, with 3 bedrooms, a front room, a kitchen, and a small study lined with books. Outside were the barn, the chicken coop, the vegetable garden, the well. Chickens need feeding twice a day, Martha said, scattering grain with practiced efficiency. Eggs need collecting every morning. Garden needs watering when it's dry, which is always. Laundry's on Mondays, baking's on Wednesdays. Any questions? Where's Caleb? Martha pointed toward the distant hills. Out with the cattle. He's got about 200 head scattered across 5,000 acres. Keeps him busy. You do it all himself? Mostly. Hires extra hands during roundup, but otherwise it's just him. She paused. He's a good man. Quiet, but good. Doesn't talk unless he's got something worth saying. How long have you worked for him? 10 years. Came out here after my husband died. Needed work, needed somewhere to be. Caleb needed someone to keep this place from falling apart. Worked out for both of us. You don't have family? Martha's expression closed off slightly. Had a daughter, died of fever when she was 16. After that, my husband just gave up, drank himself to death within a year. So no family. I'm sorry, Eliza said quietly. Don't be. That was a long time ago. Martha handed her the basket of eggs. Point is, Caleb understands loss. Understands what it's like to need a fresh start. That's why he brought you here. What did he lose? That's his story to tell, not mine. Fair enough. They worked through the morning, feeding animals, weeding the garden, mending a fence that had come loose. The labor was physical, demanding, and Eliza loved it. Loved the way her muscles burned, the way her mind could go quiet and just focus on the task at hand. By midday, she was exhausted but satisfied. She washed up at the well, splashing cool water on her face and neck, then helped Martha prepare lunch. Caleb came in around 1, dirt-streaked and tired. He ate quickly, efficiently, then headed back out. Does he ever rest? Eliza asked. Martha laughed. Not if he can help it. Man's got a talent for finding work. The afternoon passed in similar fashion, chores, conversation, the slow rhythm of ranch life. By evening, Eliza was ready to collapse, but it was the good kind of tired, the kind that came from useful work. Dinner was stew and cornbread. They ate by lamplight, the windows open to catch the breeze. How's the teaching job supposed to work? Caleb asked. You got a contract? Eliza nodded. I'm supposed to meet with the town council when I arrive. They'll provide housing, a small room attached to the schoolhouse. Salary's not much, but it includes room and board. You taught before? For 6 years. Girls' Academy in St. Louis. Why'd you leave? Eliza hesitated. Victor worked there too. After we ended, it became complicated. I needed distance. Caleb absorbed this with a slight nod. You good at it? Teaching? I think so. The students seemed to learn. Some of them even liked me. Then Silver Ridge is lucky to have you. The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. She looked down at her plate, throat tight. Thank you, she managed. Just truth. After dinner, they sat on the porch. Caleb in one chair, Martha in another, Eliza on the steps. The sky was darkening, stars beginning to emerge. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. It's beautiful out here, Eliza said softly. It's harsh, Caleb corrected. But yeah, beautiful too. You ever think about leaving? No. This is home. Even though it's hard? Especially because it's hard, easy things don't mean much. Eliza thought about that. About the years she'd spent making herself small, making things easy for Victor, for everyone around her. It had meant nothing, less than nothing. I want to mean something, she said, surprising herself. Caleb looked at her. You already do. How can you say that? You don't even know me. I know you didn't give up. That's enough. It was such a simple statement, such unearned faith. Eliza wanted to argue, to list all the ways she'd failed, all the times she'd been weak, but the words wouldn't come. Maybe because, just for tonight, she wanted to believe him. The days began to blend together, each one following the same pattern. Wake at dawn, chores, meals, more chores, sleep. It was repetitive, exhausting, and exactly what Eliza needed. Her body began to recover. The bruises faded. The constant ache in her muscles eased. She put on a little weight, not much, but enough that her clothes fit better. Her face looked less hollow. But the real healing was happening somewhere deeper. It started small. The way Martha asked her opinion on things, which chickens to cull, how much salt to put in the bread. The way Caleb listened when she spoke, his full attention on her words rather than dismissing them. The way neither of them ever commented on her size, her appetite, her space in the world. She just existed. And it was enough. One evening, about 2 weeks in, Caleb came back from town with supplies and a newspaper. He set it on the table without comment. Eliza picked it up, scanning the headlines. There, on the second page, was a small notice. Wanted, teacher for Silver Ridge School. Start date August 15th. Inquire with town council. 2 weeks away. Her stomach twisted. 2 weeks. She'd lost track of time, let herself drift in the safety of the ranch, but the world was still out there, waiting. You nervous? Caleb asked. Terrified. Good. Means you care. What if I'm not ready? You are. How do you know? He considered this. Because you're here, still fighting, still planning. That's more than most people manage. Eliza wanted to believe him. Wanted to feel the confidence he seemed to have in her. But doubt was a habit too deeply ingrained. What if they don't like me? She asked quietly. The town, the council, the parents? What if they take one look and decide I'm not suitable? Then they're fools. That's not helpful. It's true, though. Caleb leaned back in his chair. People are going to judge you. That's what people do. You can't control that. All you can control is whether you let it stop you. And if I fail, then you fail. And you try again, or you try something else. World doesn't end. Martha, who'd been listening from the kitchen, spoke up. He's right, you know, about the trying again part. Not much else, but that he got right. Hey, Caleb protested. You want me to lie? Would be nice occasionally. Eliza laughed, a real laugh, surprised and genuine. When was the last time she'd done that? The conversation drifted to other things. Town gossip, weather predictions, Martha's eternal war with the gophers eating her vegetables. Normal things. Easy things. Later, lying in bed, Eliza thought about the newspaper notice. August 15th. Her chance. Her terror. You deserve this, she told herself. You earned it. The words felt foreign, but maybe if she said them enough times, they'd start to feel true. A week before she was scheduled to leave, Caleb asked if she wanted to ride out to see the cattle. It's a fair distance, he warned. About 3 hours each way. You up for it? Eliza had been helping Martha all morning, her muscles pleasantly sore from hauling water and chopping vegetables. I think so. Good. We leave at dawn. They set out early, the air still cool, the sky just beginning to lighten. Caleb rode a sturdy bay gelding, Eliza a smaller mare named Daisy, who seemed content to plod along at an easy pace. The land rolled out before them, endless, ancient, indifferent. Eliza had grown to love it, the way it demanded nothing and offered everything. Space, silence, the chance to be small without being diminished. You ride much before? Caleb asked. Some, back in Missouri. Different kind of riding out here. How so? Back east, you ride for pleasure. Out here, it's transportation, survival. You learn quick, or you don't last. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of leather and the steady thud of hoofbeats. Can I ask you something? Eliza said finally. Sure. Why did you really help me that day at the trading post? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You remind me of someone. Who? My wife. The word hung in the air. Eliza hadn't known he'd been married. Martha had mentioned loss, but not specifics. What happened to her? Eliza asked softly. Cholera. About 8 years ago. We'd only been married 3 years. I'm sorry. Me too. He adjusted his hat, eyes on the horizon. Her name was Sarah. She was fierce, smart, didn't take any nonsense from anyone, including me. When I met her, she was running a boarding house in Tucson, working herself half to death to keep it afloat after her father died. Everyone said she should sell it, find a husband to take care of her. She told them all to go to hell. Eliza smiled despite herself. Sounds like a woman I would have liked. You would have. Caleb's voice was soft. When she got sick, she fought hard. But some things you can't fight. That must have been terrible. It was. Still is sometimes. He glanced at her. But here's the thing. Sarah would have hated seeing someone in trouble and doing nothing about it. Would have called me a coward. So when I saw you in that dirt, I heard her voice in my head, clear as day, saying, "Don't you dare walk away." Eliza's throat tightened. I'm honored to remind you of her. You should be. She was hell of a woman. They rode on, the conversation drifting to easier topics. Cattle prices, water sources, the best routes through the hills. But something had shifted between them, a deeper understanding settling into place. When they finally reached the herd, a scattered collection of brown and white bodies grazing across a wide valley, Caleb dismounted and walked among them, checking for injuries, counting heads. Eliza watched him work, noting the careful, methodical way he moved, the quiet competence. You ever think about getting help? She asked. Hiring someone permanent? Thought about it. Haven't found anyone worth trusting. Trust's hard to come by. Out here? Damn near impossible. He straightened, wiping sweat from his forehead. But necessary. Can't run a place like this alone forever. Then why do you? Because alone's simpler. Alone, you only have yourself to disappoint. Eliza understood that. Understood it bone deep. They ate lunch in the shade of a twisted juniper, jerky and hard cheese and water from Caleb's canteen. The silence stretched, comfortable and undemanding. You scared? Caleb asked eventually. About Silver Ridge? Yes. Good answer. Anyone who says they're not scared is either lying or stupid. Which are you? He laughed. Little of both, probably. The ride back was slower, the heat building as the day wore on. By the time they reached the ranch, both were dusty and tired. Martha had dinner waiting, roast chicken and potatoes. How were the cattle? She asked. Good. Lost one to a mountain lion, looks like, but the rest are healthy. Mountain lion. Martha shook her head. This country's trying to kill us. Been trying for years, haven't succeeded yet. After dinner, Eliza helped wash dishes, while Martha and Caleb argued good-naturedly about whether to plant more corn or stick with beans. Normal domestic squabbling, the kind that comes from familiarity and comfort. Eliza realized with a pang that she was going to miss this, miss the routine, the simplicity, the feeling of being part of something without having to earn it every second. But Silver Ridge was waiting, her future, her chance. She just had to be brave enough to take it. The night before she left, Martha gave her a package wrapped in brown paper. What's this? Eliza asked. Open it. Inside were 2 dresses, simple but well made, one dark blue, one gray, along with undergarments, stockings, and a warm shawl. Martha, I can't. You can, and you will. You're going to be a teacher. You need to look the part. But these are yours. Were mine. Now they're yours. End of discussion. Eliza held the dresses, vision blurring. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just don't embarrass me by showing up looking like a ragamuffin. But her voice was gentle, and when Eliza hugged her, Martha hugged back, brief but fierce. Caleb was on the porch when Eliza went out later, watching the sunset. Mind if I join you? She asked. Course not. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sky turn orange and red and purple. I don't know how to thank you, Eliza said finally, for everything. Don't need thanks. I know, but I'm giving it anyway. Caleb smiled slightly. Then you're welcome. I'm still scared, she admitted, about tomorrow, about all of it. Be strange if you weren't. What if I fail? What if I get there and it all falls apart? Then you'll figure it out. You're tougher than you think. I don't feel tough. Tough people rarely do. He turned to look at her. Sarah used to say that strength isn't about never being afraid. It's about being afraid and doing it anyway. Your wife sounds like she was very wise. She was. He paused. You know what else she used to say? That the world needs more people who refuse to quit. I think you're one of those people, Eliza. She wanted to believe him, wanted to feel the certainty he seemed to have, but all she felt was the weight of tomorrow pressing down. What if they hate me? She whispered. Some might. Can't control that. What if I hate myself? Then you work on not doing that. It was such a simple answer, such an impossible task. But maybe that was the point. Maybe impossible was just another word for worth doing. The stars came out, scattered across the darkness like promises. Eliza sat with Caleb until the cold drove them inside, neither speaking, both understanding that some things didn't need words. Tomorrow, she would leave. Tomorrow, she would step into the unknown and hope she was strong enough to survive it. Tonight, she let herself believe she might be, and maybe that was enough. The wagon rattled into Silver Ridge just after noon on a Tuesday, dust swirling up from the wheels and coating everything in a fine layer of grit. Eliza sat beside Caleb on the bench seat, her hands gripped tight around the edge, knuckles white beneath sun-darkened skin. The town wasn't much to look at. A single main street lined with wooden buildings, general store, saloon, blacksmith, what looked like a doctor's office. Maybe 30 structures total, half of them looking like a strong wind might knock them over. Beyond the buildings, scattered houses dotted the landscape, adobe and wood constructions that seemed to hunker down against the earth as if bracing for impact. This was it, her future, her chance. It looked about as welcoming as a rattlesnake den. That's the schoolhouse, Caleb said, nodding toward a small building at the far end of the street. It stood slightly apart from the others, whitewashed wood with a bell tower and 2 windows flanking a plain door. Next to it, connected by a covered walkway, was an even smaller structure, probably the teacher's quarters. Eliza's stomach clenched. That tiny building. That was going to be home. You okay? Caleb asked quietly. No? Honest, I like that. They pulled up in front of the general store and immediately people started noticing them. A woman sweeping her porch stopped mid-stroke. 2 men loading supplies onto a wagon paused to stare. A group of children playing in the street went silent. Eliza felt their eyes like physical weights, assessing, judging, finding her wanting before she'd even opened her mouth. Ignore them, Caleb murmured. Let's find the council. The general store doubled as the post office, and apparently the unofficial town hall. Inside, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses looked up from behind the counter. Help you? Looking for the town council, Caleb said. Got your new teacher here. The man's eyebrows rose. He looked at Eliza, his gaze traveling from her face down to her boots and back up again. She saw the moment his expression shifted, not hostile exactly, but doubtful. You're Miss Hartwell? I am. We expected you 2 weeks ago. There were complications with my travel. What kind of complications? Caleb stepped forward slightly. The kind that are none of your business. She's here now. That good enough? The man bristled. I'm Samuel Cooper, council secretary, and I'll thank you to remember that this is a respectable town with standards. Then I'm sure you'll treat Miss Hartwell with the respect she deserves, Caleb interrupted, his voice mild but his eyes hard. Won't you? Cooper's mouth worked for a moment, then he nodded curtly. Council meets at 4 o'clock. Town hall's next door. The building with the blue door. Don't be late. Wouldn't dream of it, Eliza said, forcing her voice to stay level. They left, stepping back into the sunlight. Eliza took a breath, trying to calm the hammering of her heart. That was pleasant, she muttered. That was nothing, Caleb said. Wait till you meet the rest of them. They walked down to the schoolhouse. The door was unlocked, swinging open with a creak that echoed in the empty space. Inside was exactly what Eliza had expected. Rough wooden benches arranged in rows, a teacher's desk at the front, a blackboard mounted on the wall. Bare, functional. Hers. The teacher's quarters were even smaller than they'd looked from outside. A single room with a narrow bed, a washstand, a small stove, and a table with 1 chair. A window looked out onto scrubland. No curtains, no rug, nothing soft or welcoming. It's perfect, Eliza said, and meant it. This was hers. Nobody could take it away. Caleb set down the trunk containing her few possessions. You sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. He smiled slightly. Good answer. He hesitated, then pulled something from his pocket, a small leather pouch. There's $50 in here, emergency money. Hide it somewhere safe. Caleb, I can't. Yes, you can, and you will. Consider it a loan if that makes you feel better. Pay me back when you're able. Eliza took the pouch, throat tight. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you've survived your first month. He moved toward the door, then paused. Meeting's in a few hours. You need anything before then? Just luck. You don't need luck. You've got something better. What's that? Grit. He tipped his hat. See you at 4. Then he was gone, and Eliza was alone in her new home, listening to the silence and trying not to panic. She spent the next few hours unpacking, hanging the dresses Martha had given her, arranging her few books on the shelf above the bed, setting out the wash basin. The activity helped calm her nerves, gave her hands something to do while her mind raced. At 3:30, she changed into the blue dress, braided her hair into a neat coronet, and walked to the town hall with her spine straight and her hands only shaking a little. The building was larger than the others, with a main room set up for meetings. 5 people sat at a table at the front, 3 men, 2 women. Samuel Cooper was there, along with 4 others Eliza didn't recognize. They all looked up when she entered. Miss Hartwell, Cooper said, his tone formal. Please sit. There was a single chair facing the table. Eliza sat, feeling like she was on trial. I'm Samuel Cooper, Council Secretary, Cooper began. This is Edward Brennan, Council Chairman. Margaret Thornton and Ruth Cassidy, Council members. And James Fletcher, also Council. Nods all around. Edward Brennan was a heavy-set man in his 50s with a florid face and assessing eyes. Margaret Thornton looked severe and proper, her gray hair pulled back so tight it must have hurt. Ruth Cassidy was younger, maybe 30, with a softer expression. James Fletcher was lean and weathered, with the look of someone who'd spent his life outdoors. We received your application 3 months ago, Brennan said. Impressive credentials. 6 years at the Fairmont Academy for Girls. Excellent references. Thank you. However, Brennan continued, those references are from St. Louis. You're a long way from Missouri, Miss Hartwell. Yes, sir. Mind telling us why you left? Eliza had prepared for this question. I was seeking new opportunities. The frontier appealed to me. The frontier, leak. Margaret Thornton's voice was clipped. You understand that teaching here is nothing like teaching at a fancy girls' school? Our children are rough. Many of them have never seen the inside of a classroom. I understand that, ma'am. Do you? Thornton leaned forward. Because frankly, Miss Hartwell, you don't look like someone who can handle frontier life. You're soft, city-bred. The first time a rattlesnake gets in the schoolhouse or a dust storm hits, you'll be on the next stage back east. The words stung, but Eliza kept her voice steady. With respect, ma'am, appearances can be deceiving. I may not have been born on the frontier, but I assure you I'm capable of handling whatever challenges arise. Bold words, Fletcher said. But can you back them up? I suppose you'll have to hire me and find out. Cooper frowned. That's rather presumptuous. Is it? Eliza interrupted. She was tired of being talked down to, tired of defending her right to exist in space. You advertised for a teacher. I applied. I was hired, pending this meeting. I've traveled over 1,000 miles to be here. I don't think it's presumptuous to expect that you'll honor your commitment. Silence. Thornton's eyebrows had climbed halfway up her forehead. Then Ruth Cassidy spoke for the first time, her voice mild. She's got spirit. I like that. Spirit doesn't teach children to read, Thornton snapped. No, but education does, and according to her references, Miss Hartwell is an excellent educator. Cassidy looked at Eliza. What's your approach to teaching, Miss Hartwell? How do you handle students who don't want to learn? Finally, a question Eliza could answer with confidence. I believe every child wants to learn, Mrs. Cassidy. Sometimes they just haven't found the right reason yet. My job is to help them find it, make the material relevant to their lives, show them how reading helps them understand contracts so they don't get cheated, how arithmetic helps them run a business or manage a household, how history helps them understand the world they're living in. Cassidy nodded slowly. Practical. I appreciate that. What about discipline? Brennan asked. We've had trouble in the past with teachers who couldn't maintain order. I maintain order through respect, Mr. Brennan. I expect my students to behave appropriately, and in return, I treat them as intelligent human beings capable of learning. If that fails, there are consequences. But I've found that most children respond better to expectations than to punishment. The council members exchanged glances. Some kind of silent communication Eliza couldn't read. Finally, Brennan spoke. You'll start Monday. School runs Monday through Friday, 8 to 3. Salary is $30 a month plus housing. You're responsible for maintaining the schoolhouse and your quarters. Any supplies you need beyond the basics, you purchase yourself and submit receipts for reimbursement. Understood? Relief flooded through her. Yes, sir. Thank you. Don't thank us yet, Thornton said crisply. We'll be watching Miss Hartwell. One misstep and you're gone. Clear? Crystal. As Eliza stood to leave, Ruth Cassidy followed her out. Don't mind Margaret, she said quietly. She's protective of the children, lost her son to fever last year, makes her cautious about who she trusts. I appreciate the context, Eliza said. Most of the parents will give you a chance, some won't. Just prove them wrong. That's the best revenge. Cassidy smiled, brief but genuine, then returned to the meeting. Eliza walked back to the schoolhouse, feeling like she'd just survived a battle, which, in a way, she had. Caleb was waiting outside, leaning against the wagon. How'd it go? I start Monday. Never doubted it. He straightened. I need to head back before dark. You going to be all right? I think so. You know where to find me if you're not. 10 miles north, I remember. He handed her a piece of paper. Directions, in case you forget. And there's usually someone heading that direction on weekends. You need something, send word. Eliza took the paper, folding it carefully. Caleb, I don't know what I would have done without you. You would have figured it out. That's what you do. He climbed onto the wagon, gathered the reins, then he paused. One more thing, he said. That voice in your head that tells you you're not good enough? It's lying. You remember that. Then he was gone, the wagon rolling away down the dusty street, leaving Eliza alone in her new life. She stood there for a long moment, watching until the wagon disappeared. Then she turned and went inside. Time to get to work. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. Eliza scrubbed the schoolhouse from top to bottom, swept out months of accumulated dust, washed the windows until they gleamed. She organized the few supplies she'd found, slates, chalk, a handful of battered primers, a globe with half the countries labeled wrong. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Saturday afternoon, there was a knock on her door. A woman stood outside, maybe 40, wearing a faded calico dress and carrying a basket. Miss Hartwell, I'm Helen Carter. My boy Thomas will be in your class. It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Carter. Helen thrust the basket forward. Brought you some bread and preserves. Figured you might not have had time to get supplies yet. The kindness surprised Eliza. That's very generous, thank you. It's nothing. Helen hesitated. Listen, I wanted to say, don't let Margaret Thornton scare you off. She's tough, but she's fair. And this town needs a teacher. The last one quit after 3 weeks. What happened? Parents interfered too much. Children ran wild. She couldn't handle it. Helen met Eliza's eyes. I'm hoping you're tougher than you look. I suppose we'll find out. Helen smiled. I suppose we will. Thomas is 8. Smart boy, but stubborn. Takes after his father that way. I look forward to meeting him. After Helen left, Eliza unpacked the basket. Fresh bread, still warm, strawberry preserves, a small jar of honey. Simple things, but they felt like hope. Sunday, she forced herself to walk through town, learning the layout. The general store, where Cooper barely acknowledged her. The saloon, which she walked past quickly, ignoring the stares from the men on the porch. The doctor's office, where a middle-aged man with kind eyes introduced himself as Dr. Hayes and told her to come by if she needed anything. Town can be rough on newcomers, he said, especially women on their own. You have any trouble, you let me know. I will, thank you. By Sunday evening, Eliza had met maybe a dozen people, some friendly, some neutral, some openly hostile. She was starting to get a sense of the town's dynamics, the invisible lines that divided neighbors. She barely slept that night, her mind racing through lesson plans, potential problems, all the ways this could go wrong. Monday morning arrived too soon. Eliza woke before dawn, dressed carefully, braided her hair. She'd planned to make breakfast, but her stomach was too tight to eat. Instead, she made coffee and stood by the window, watching the sky lighten. At 7:30, she walked to the schoolhouse and rang the bell. Nothing happened. She rang it again. Waited. Still nothing. Panic started to creep in. What if no one came? What if the parents had decided not to send their children? What if this whole thing was a mistake? Then she saw them, small figures in the distance, walking toward the school. 1, then 2, then 5. Relief washed over her. The children arrived in clusters, siblings mostly, the older ones dragging the younger. They ranged in age from maybe 5 to 14, dressed in clothes that were clean but worn, many of them barefoot despite the rough ground. They filed into the schoolhouse silently, taking seats, staring at her with unreadable expressions. Eliza counted. 18 students, more than she'd expected. "Good morning," she said, keeping her voice calm and steady. "My name is Miss Hartwell. I'm your new teacher." Silence. No one moved. "I'd like to start by learning your names. Let's go around the room. Please stand, tell me your name and your age." The first boy stood, tall and gangly, maybe 13. "Tom Carter. Helen's son." Eliza nodded. "Thank you, Tom." They went around. Tom's younger brother, James. A girl named Sarah, 8 years old with serious eyes. The Miller twins, impossible to tell apart. A tiny girl named Lucy who couldn't have been more than 5. On and on, 18 names Eliza committed to memory. When they finished, she said, "I want to be clear about expectations. We're here to learn. That means paying attention, working hard, and treating each other with respect. In return, I'll treat you the same way. I won't talk down to you or waste your time. Fair?" A few nods. Most just stared. "All right, let's start with assessment. I need to know where everyone is so I can teach accordingly. We'll begin with reading." She handed out the primers, asked each student to read a passage aloud. The results were mixed. Some, like Tom and Sarah, read fluently. Others struggled with basic words. A few couldn't read at all. Next came arithmetic. Again, the abilities varied wildly. Some could multiply. Others couldn't add single digits. By mid-morning, Eliza had a sense of what she was working with. It wasn't pretty. Years of inconsistent teaching had left massive gaps, but gaps could be filled. She divided them into groups based on ability, assigned work to each group, then rotated through, giving individual attention. It was exhausting, requiring constant movement and attention, but it worked. At noon, she dismissed them for lunch. Most scattered immediately, running home or to shaded spots to eat whatever they'd brought. A few lingered. Lucy, the tiny 5-year-old, approached Eliza's desk shyly. "Yes, Lucy?" "You're pretty," Lucy said softly. The comment caught Eliza completely off guard. Thank you. The last teacher was mean. Are you mean?" "I try not to be." "Good." Lucy smiled, then ran off to join the other children. Eliza sat at her desk, a strange feeling blooming in her chest. These children, these rough, half-educated frontier children, were giving her a chance. The least she could do was earn it. The afternoon session went smoother. She taught a history lesson about the Revolutionary War, making it relevant by connecting it to their own experiences with authority and independence. The older students engaged, asking questions, arguing points. Even the younger ones listened, drawn in by the story. At 3 o'clock, she dismissed them. They filed out more slowly than they'd arrived, several calling goodbye. Eliza sat in the empty schoolhouse, exhausted but satisfied. Day 1. Survived. She was gathering papers when the door opened. Margaret Thornton stood in the entrance, her expression unreadable. "Mrs. Thornton." "Miss Hartwell, I wanted to check on how the first day went." "It went well, I think. The children are bright. They need structure, but they're willing to learn." Thornton walked slowly through the room, inspecting the slates, the books, the arrangement. "My grandson William was here today. He's 10. Eliza remembered, a quiet boy with dark eyes who'd struggled with reading but excelled at arithmetic. "William did very well today," Eliza said. "He has a strong aptitude for numbers. His mother died when he was born. His father is absent. I'm raising him." Thornton's voice was carefully neutral. "He's all I have left." Understanding clicked into place. "I'll take good care of him, Mrs. Thornton." "See that you do." Thornton turned to leave, then paused. "You handled today better than I expected. Don't let it go to your head. Tomorrow will be harder." "Why?" "Because today they were curious. Tomorrow they'll test you. She was right. Tuesday morning, the children arrived with a different energy, louder, bolder, testing boundaries. Tom Carter talked during lessons. The Miller twins passed notes. A boy named Jacob deliberately knocked his slate off the desk, shattering it. Eliza handled each incident calmly. Tom was separated from his friends. The twins lost recess privileges. Jacob was assigned to clean up the mess and write an essay on respecting property. No yelling, no drama, just consequences, clearly stated and consistently enforced. By Wednesday, the testing had mostly stopped. They were starting to believe she meant what she said. Thursday brought a different challenge. Midway through morning lessons, a man walked into the schoolhouse unannounced. He was large, bearded, wearing work clothes stained with what looked like axle grease. "You the new teacher?" he demanded. "I am. And you are?" "Ben Miller. Those are my boys," he pointed at the twins. "They tell me you've got them doing girl work, penmanship and spelling. They don't need that. They need arithmetic and practical skills." Eliza stood, keeping her voice level. "Mr. Miller, I appreciate your concern. However, penmanship and spelling are practical skills. Your sons will need to write contracts, correspond with suppliers, keep records. Those require literacy. Literacies for clerks and women. My boys are going to run my freight business. Then they'll need to write invoices, read shipping manifests, communicate with clients, all of which require the skills I'm teaching." Miller's face reddened. "I don't like your tone, and I don't appreciate you interrupting my classroom. If you have concerns, we can discuss them after school. But right now I'm teaching." They stared at each other. The children watched, silent and tense. Finally, Miller grunted. "We'll talk later." 3:00. "I'll be here." He left, slamming the door. Eliza took a breath, then turned back to the class. "Where were we?" "Right, the Louisiana Purchase." She could feel the shift in the room. The children looked at her differently now. She'd stood up to an angry parent, hadn't backed down. She'd passed another test. Miller didn't show up at 3:00, or the next day, but his boys kept coming to school, and when Eliza saw Miller in town the following week, he gave her a curt nod. Progress. The days blurred together. Lessons, discipline, small victories, and frustrating setbacks. Eliza developed routines, learned which children responded to encouragement and which needed firmer boundaries. She started a lending library with her own books, watching the children's faces light up when they discovered stories. Sarah, the serious 8-year-old, became her star pupil, devouring books, asking questions that showed real thought. Tom Carter stopped testing and started learning. His natural intelligence finally engaged. Even Lucy, barely old enough to be there, learned her letters and could sound out simple words. But it wasn't all smooth. There were parents who disapproved of teaching girls the same curriculum as boys. Families who pulled their children out for weeks at a time to help with harvests or ranch work. A persistent rumor that Eliza was too educated for her own good, that she'd fill the children's heads with fancy ideas. And always there was the weight of being watched, judged, found wanting by people who'd decided her worth before meeting her. 3 weeks in, Eliza was walking back from the general store when she overheard 2 women talking. "I don't trust her," one said. "Too big to be proper. Probably eats more than she earns. And that Eastern accent thinks she's better than us. Give it another month, she'll quit just like the others." Eliza kept walking, face burning. She'd heard variations of this her whole life. It shouldn't hurt anymore. But it did. That night, alone in her small room, she let herself cry. Not from sadness, from frustration, from the exhaustion of constantly having to prove herself, from the unfairness of being judged for things she couldn't control. Then she dried her eyes, made tea, and planned the next day's lessons. Because giving up wasn't an option. A month into the term, Ruth Cassidy stopped by after school. "How are you settling in?" she asked. "Well enough," Eliza said. "The children are making progress. I've heard. Sarah's mother says her daughter reads everything she can get her hands on now." Ruth smiled. "You're doing good work." "Thank you. I also wanted to invite you to dinner, Friday night, if you're free. Just my husband and me and our daughter. Nothing fancy." The invitation surprised Eliza. "I'd like that." "Good. 6:00. The house with the blue shutters on Oak Street." Friday evening, Eliza arrived at the Cassidy home nervous and uncertain. But Ruth greeted her warmly, introduced her husband Daniel, a quiet man who worked as a carpenter, and their daughter Emma, who was 7 and immediately monopolized Eliza's attention with questions about books and arithmetic. Dinner was simple: roast chicken, potatoes, bread, but the conversation was easy. No judgment, no testing, just friendship. "How are you really doing?" Ruth asked over coffee after Emma had been sent to bed. Eliza considered lying, then decided against it. "It's hard. Harder than I expected." "The teaching or the town?" "The town. The teaching I can handle, but the constant scrutiny, the gossip, the feeling that I'm one mistake away from being run out, that's exhausting." Daniel spoke up. "For what it's worth, not everyone feels that way. Ruth and I think you're doing a fine job. So does Doc Hayes, Helen Carter, the Johnsons. But Margaret Thornton doesn't, neither does Samuel Cooper or half the council." "Margaret's coming around," Ruth said. "William's reading has improved dramatically. She won't admit it, but she's noticed." "And Cooper's an ass," Daniel added. Ruth elbowed him. "What? He is?" Despite everything, Eliza laughed. She left that night feeling lighter. Maybe she didn't have the whole town on her side, but she had some people. That was something. The next morning, she woke to someone pounding on her door. "Miss Hartwell! Miss Hartwell! Wake up!" She stumbled to the door, still in her nightgown. Helen Carter stood outside, face pale. "What's wrong?" "It's Thomas. He's missing, been gone since last night. We've searched everywhere, but—" Her voice broke. Eliza grabbed her arm. "Slow down. Tell me what happened." "He and James had a fight yesterday. Tom ran off angry. We thought he'd cool down and come home, but he never did. We've checked the usual places, the creek, the Miller Ranch, town, but there's no sign of him." Eliza's mind raced. Where would he go if he wanted to be alone? Somewhere he felt safe, Helen thought. There's an old line shack about 2 miles north. He and his father used to go there before his father died. But that was years ago. "Let's check there." They assembled a search party: Daniel Cassidy, Doc Hayes, Ben Miller, a few others. Someone rode out to get Caleb. They split up, covering different areas. Eliza joined the group heading to the line shack, despite protests that she should stay behind. "He's my student," she said firmly. "I'm going." The ride took an hour. The shack was barely standing, half the roof caved in. But as they approached, Eliza saw smoke rising from what remained of the chimney. "Tom?" Helen called. "Tom? Are you there?" No answer. Eliza dismounted, approached the door carefully. "Tom, it's Miss Hartwell. Your mother's here. We've been worried about you." A long pause, then quietly, "Go away. I can't do that. You want to come out, or should I come in?" Another pause. "Come in, I guess." Eliza pushed open the door. Tom sat in the corner, arms wrapped around his knees, face streaked with dirt and tears. He looked younger than 13, looked like a scared child. "You all right?" Eliza asked, sitting down nearby. "I'm fine." "You don't look fine." "What do you care?" "Because you're my student. Because you're a good kid who's clearly hurting. Because your mother is terrified." Tom's face crumpled. "I didn't mean to scare her. I needed to get away." "From what?" "From James, from home, from everyone expecting me to be like my father when I don't even remember him." The words burst out, raw and angry. "Everyone says I'm just like him, look like him, talk like him, but I don't know him. He died when I was 3. How am I supposed to be like someone I never knew?" Eliza's heart ached. "You don't have to be like him, Tom. You just have to be yourself." "What if myself isn't good enough?" "Then you work on being better. But you start from who you are, not who people think you should be." Tom wiped his eyes roughly. "You ever feel like that? Like everyone has ideas about who you are and none of them are right?" "Every day," Eliza said honestly. "Every single day." "What do you do about it?" "I try to prove them wrong. Try to be the person I want to be, not the person they expect. It doesn't always work, but it's better than giving up." They sat in silence for a moment. "Your mother loves you," Eliza said finally. "Whatever expectations she has, they come from love. Maybe talk to her. Tell her what you told me. She'll think I'm being dramatic. She'll think you're being honest. There's a difference." Tom stood slowly, wiping his face. "Can we go home?" "Whenever you're ready." They emerged from the shack to find Helen sobbing with relief. She grabbed Tom, holding him tight, and he let her. Didn't pull away or act tough, just held on. On the ride back, Caleb pulled up alongside Eliza. Heard you talked him down. Just listened. That's what he needed. Most adults don't know how to do that. You're good at this teaching thing. Some days I think so. Others, I'm not sure. Welcome to doing anything worth doing, Caleb said. Doubt means you care. Back in town, word spread quickly about how Miss Hartwell had found Tom Carter, how she'd talked to him, brought him home safe. The story grew in the telling. By evening, some versions had her tracking him through a thunderstorm. Others had her fighting off wolves. Eliza ignored the embellishments. What mattered was that Tom was safe. What mattered was that the town was starting to see her differently. Not as an outsider, not as someone to be tolerated, as someone who belonged. October arrived with cooler temperatures and the kind of clear skies that made the desert look almost gentle. Eliza had been teaching for 2 months now, and the rhythm of it had become familiar. The early morning bell, the shuffle of small feet, the particular quality of silence when children were actually thinking instead of just pretending to listen. She was grading papers one Thursday afternoon when Margaret Thornton appeared in the doorway. No knock, no warning. Just suddenly there, looking like she'd swallowed something unpleasant. Mrs. Thornton, Eliza said, setting down her pen. What can I do for you? William's reading level has improved 3 grades in 2 months. It wasn't a question, so Eliza waited. Thornton's mouth worked for a moment, like the words were fighting their way out. I wanted to acknowledge that. The progress. William's a bright boy. He just needed consistent instruction. Yes. Well. Thornton smoothed her skirt unnecessarily. I may have misjudged you, initially. It was the closest thing to an apology Eliza was likely to get. I appreciate you saying that. Don't let it go to your head. You still have plenty to prove. But Thornton's voice had lost its edge. The fall social is next month, first Saturday in November. Everyone attends. You should come. I'll consider it. That wasn't a suggestion, Miss Hartwell. Teachers are expected to participate in community events. Builds trust with the families. After Thornton left, Eliza sat back in her chair, something like satisfaction warming her chest. Not acceptance, exactly, but recognition. She was becoming part of the fabric here, thread by thread. That evening, she walked to the general store for supplies. Samuel Cooper was behind the counter, sorting mail. Miss Hartwell, he said, his tone still formal but no longer hostile. Package came for you. He handed her a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. The return address made her stomach drop. St. Louis. She knew that handwriting. Thank you, she managed, taking the package with hands that wanted to shake. Back in her room, she stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a book, a collection of Tennyson poems, and a letter. Eliza, I heard you've taken a position in New Mexico. Teaching, of all things. Always did think you were wasting your talents on children who will never appreciate them. I've thought about you often since you left. About the mistakes we both made. I was too hard on you sometimes, I know that now. You were too sensitive, but I should have been more patient. I'm willing to try again if you are. I've secured a position at a school in Santa Fe, respectable, well-paying. There's a place for you here if you want it. Better than whatever backwater you're in now. Think about it. You know where to find me. Victor Eliza read it twice, then a third time, waiting for the familiar pull of doubt to surface. The voice that said maybe he was right, maybe she was being stubborn. Maybe she should be grateful someone wanted her at all. The voice didn't come. Instead, she felt something closer to anger. Not the hot, explosive kind, the cold, clarifying kind that cuts through fog and shows you exactly where you're standing. You were too sensitive, as if her feelings were a flaw he'd graciously tolerated. Better than whatever backwater you're in. As if he knew anything about what she'd built here. She carried the letter to the stove, lit a match, and watched it burn. The book she kept, spite, maybe, or just practicality. Books were expensive, but Victor's words? Those could turn to ash. The next morning, Tom Carter approached her desk before class started. Miss Hartwell, can I ask you something? Of course. How do you know when you're supposed to fight for something and when you're supposed to let it go? Eliza studied him. His face was serious, troubled in a way that suggested this wasn't an abstract question. That depends. What are we talking about? Tom shifted his weight, My uncle wants me to quit school after this year, says I'm old enough to work full-time at the freight company. Ma says education's important, but Uncle Ben says practical skills matter more. What do you want? I don't know. I like learning, like reading and figuring out how things work. But Uncle Ben's probably right. I don't need school for freight work. Do you want to do freight work forever? Tom looked startled, like the question had never occurred to him. I don't know. Never thought about it. Then maybe that's your answer. You fight for things when you don't know all your options yet, when there's still more to learn, more to become. You let go when you're certain, really certain, that you've seen everything you need to see. What if I make the wrong choice? Then you make a different choice later. Nothing's permanent except death, Tom. Everything else you can change. He nodded slowly, working through it. Thanks, Miss Hartwell. After he left, Eliza sat with her own words. Nothing's permanent except death. When had she started believing that? When had she stopped seeing her decisions as binding contracts written in stone? Maybe somewhere between the trading post dust and this classroom. Maybe in the slow accumulation of small choices that added up to a different life. The fall social dominated conversation for the next 2 weeks. Who was bringing what food? Who was performing what music? Whether the Johnsons and the Mitchells would finally stop their feud long enough to be civil. Small-town politics in all their tedious glory. Ruth Cassidy helped Eliza prepare. You'll need to bring something, Ruth said over coffee one afternoon. A dish to share shows community spirit. I'm not much of a cook. Can you make anything? Bread? I can make bread. Then bring bread. Simple is fine. Just don't show up empty-handed, or they'll never let you forget it. The night of the social, Eliza arrived at the town hall carrying 3 loaves wrapped in clean cloth. The building was already crowded, tables laden with food, children running between clusters of adults. A makeshift band, fiddle, guitar, harmonica, was setting up in the corner. She'd barely stepped inside when Helen Carter grabbed her arm. Thank heavens, I need help with the children's table. Emma Cassidy just spilled an entire pitcher of lemonade and half the mothers are acting like it's a sign of the apocalypse. Eliza followed Helen to where a group of women were frantically mopping up the mess while Emma stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. It was an accident, Eliza said firmly, taking a cloth and joining the cleanup. No harm done. No harm? The tablecloth is ruined. This from a thin woman Eliza recognized as Mrs. Fletcher. It's a tablecloth. It'll wash. That's not the point. Then what is the point? Eliza straightened, looking directly at Mrs. Fletcher. Emma's 7 years old. She made a mistake. She feels terrible. Standing here making her feel worse doesn't help anyone. Silence. Mrs. Fletcher's mouth opened, closed. Then Ruth appeared, putting a hand on her daughter's shoulder. Come on, Emma, let's get you cleaned up. The crisis dissolved. Within minutes, the mess was cleared, a new cloth was found, and Emma had stopped crying. But Eliza was aware of the looks, some approving, some less so. She was still too outspoken, too direct. She should have let it go, let the mothers handle it their way. But she hadn't, couldn't. Dr. Hayes found her later, a knowing smile on his weathered face. Heard you defended Emma Cassidy. Someone had to. The poor child was terrified. You made an enemy of Mrs. Fletcher. I'll survive. That you will. He handed her a cup of punch. You're fitting in better than I expected, Miss Hartwell. Got a spine. This town needs more people with spines. Or fewer people who need standing up to. Hayes laughed. That too. The evening progressed. Eliza ate food she didn't want, made conversation with people whose names she half remembered, and tried to look comfortable in a room full of strangers who were slowly becoming less strange. Around 8 o'clock, the music started in earnest. Couples took to the makeshift dance floor, waltzes and reels, movements Eliza vaguely recognized from her time in St. Louis. She was content to watch from the sidelines when Caleb appeared beside her. You came, she said, genuinely surprised. Martha threatened to burn my favorite boots if I didn't, said I was being antisocial. He surveyed the room with the expression of a man enduring a necessary evil. How long do I have to stay before I can leave without offending anyone? At least another hour, he groaned. You could dance, make the time go faster. I don't dance. Can't or won't. Both. They stood in companionable silence, watching the couples spin. Then Caleb said quietly, You're doing well here. The teaching. The town. You should be proud. I'm surviving. You're doing more than that. Tom Carter's still in school because you talked to him. William Thornton's reading because you challenged him. Sarah Miller wants to be a teacher because of you. That's not survival. That's impact. Eliza felt her throat tighten. They would have learned from anyone. Maybe. But they're learning from you. That matters. Before she could respond, Margaret Thornton's voice cut through the noise. Excuse me. Everyone, may I have your attention? The room quieted. Thornton stood near the band, her posture rigid, her expression unreadable. I wanted to make a brief announcement, she said. As you know, we've had some turnover in our teaching position over the years. 5 teachers in 3 years, to be exact. Most couldn't handle the challenges our children present. Eliza's stomach sank. Was this where Thornton announced she was unsatisfactory? Where the experiment ended? However, Thornton continued, I'm pleased to say that Miss Hartwell has exceeded our expectations. The children's progress has been remarkable. Reading levels have improved across the board. Attendance is up. And more importantly, the children actually want to come to school. Scattered applause. Eliza stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. So, on behalf of the town council, Thornton said, looking directly at Eliza, I want to publicly acknowledge Miss Hartwell's excellent work and confirm that we hope she'll continue with us for many years to come. More applause now, louder. People were turning to look at her, smiling, nodding approval. Eliza managed a weak smile and a nod, overwhelmed by the sudden rush of emotion. Acceptance. Recognition. The thing she'd been working toward without quite believing it was possible. Ruth appeared at her elbow, squeezing her arm. Congratulations. I can't believe she just did that. Margaret doesn't do anything she doesn't mean. You've won her over. That's no small feat. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and conversations. People who'd barely acknowledged her before now wanted to chat, to ask about their children's progress, to invite her to dinner. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. By 10 o'clock, Eliza was ready to leave. She said her goodbyes, gathered her empty breadbasket, and stepped out into the cool night air. Caleb was leaning against a post on the porch, clearly having escaped earlier. Thought you weren't leaving for another hour, Eliza said. Thought you weren't either. I lasted as long as I could. Same. They walked together down the quiet street, their footsteps echoing in the darkness. That was quite a speech Thornton made, Caleb said. I'm still processing it. How do you feel? Eliza thought about it. Terrified. Why? Because now they have expectations. Now I have something to lose. You always had something to lose. The difference is now you know it's worth keeping. They reached the schoolhouse. Eliza turned to face him. Thank you for everything. I wouldn't be here without you. You would have found your way eventually. Maybe, but it would have been harder. Caleb tipped his hat. Get some sleep, Miss Hartwell. You've got students to educate. And you've got cattle to tend. Always. He walked away, disappearing into the darkness, leaving Eliza standing in front of her small home with a feeling she barely recognized. Hope. Real, solid hope. The next few weeks passed quietly. Students learned, parents grudgingly approved, and Eliza settled into the strange comfort of routine. She was correcting arithmetic problems one afternoon when Sarah Miller approached her desk, face troubled. Miss Hartwell, can I ask you something personal? You can ask. I may not answer. Sarah bit her lip. How did you get brave? The question caught Eliza off guard. What makes you think I'm brave? You stood up to my pa and Mrs. Fletcher, and you moved here all by yourself from far away. That seems brave. Eliza set down her pen. I'm not brave, Sarah. I'm just stubborn. There's a difference. What's the difference? Brave people aren't afraid. Stubborn people are terrified, but do it anyway because the alternative is worse. Sarah considered this. I want to keep going to school. Pa says girls don't need education past basic reading and arithmetic, but I want more. I want to learn everything. Have you told him that? He won't listen. Says I'm getting ideas above my station. Eliza felt a familiar anger kindle. How many times had she heard similar words? How many girls had been told to shrink their dreams to fit other people's expectations? Sarah, listen to me. Your father loves you, I'm sure, but that doesn't mean he's right about what you need. Only you know that. But I'm just a kid. What do I know? More than you think. And you'll know even more if you keep learning. Knowledge is the one thing no one can take from you once you have it. Sarah nodded slowly. Will you help me with extra lessons? Absolutely. They started meeting 3 times a week after school, working through advanced readers and mathematics texts Eliza ordered from Santa Fe. Sarah absorbed everything like parched earth soaking up rain, her mind quick and hungry. Other students noticed. Soon Eliza had a small group staying after school. Sarah, William Thornton, a quiet girl named Rebecca who wanted to be a doctor, Tom Carter who had decided maybe he wanted more than the freight business after all. She didn't charge anything, just gave them access to her books, her knowledge, her time. Ben Miller showed up one afternoon, face thunderous. Sarah tells me you're keeping her after school. She asked for additional instruction. I'm providing it, without asking my permission. Sarah's education is between her, me, and the school board. But if you'd like to discuss it, we can do so after I dismiss the other students. Miller's jaw worked. You're filling her head with nonsense, making her think she's something she's not. I'm teaching her. That's my job. Your job is to teach her to read and write and do sums, not to give her ideas about being something more than a wife and mother. Eliza stood, keeping her voice level despite the rage bubbling up. Mr. Miller, with all due respect, Sarah's future is not mine to determine or yours to limit. She's a brilliant child with enormous potential. If she chooses to be a wife and mother, that's wonderful. If she chooses something else, that's equally wonderful. But she should choose, not have her options decided for her at age 8. That's not how the world works. Then maybe the world needs changing. They stared at each other. Finally, Miller said, 1 more month. Then Sarah's done with school. She can read and write. That's enough. He left before Eliza could respond. Sarah had heard everything. She stood by her desk, tears streaming down her face. It's not fair, she whispered. No, Eliza said. It's not. What do I do? You learn everything you can in the next month. You read every book I'll lend you. You fill your mind so full of knowledge that nobody can empty it. And then, when you're older, when you have choices of your own to make, you remember this feeling, and you choose differently. Sarah wiped her eyes. Will it matter? If I'm just going to end up married with babies? It matters because you'll be different. You'll raise different children, make different choices, see the world through educated eyes. Change doesn't happen all at once, Sarah. It happens person by person, choice by choice, generation by generation. I don't want to wait for change. I want it now. I know, but sometimes waiting and preparing is how we make sure change actually happens. That night, Eliza wrote a letter to the principal of a girls' school in Denver, someone she'd corresponded with years ago. She explained Sarah's situation, her potential, her need, asked if there might be scholarship opportunities in a few years, when Sarah was old enough to leave home if she chose to. It was a long shot. Maybe nothing would come of it, but it was something, a seed planted. November brought the first real cold, frost coating the desert in the mornings, breath visible in the air. Eliza woke one Thursday to the sound of hoofbeats, urgent, too fast for casual travel. She dressed quickly, stepped outside to find a rider in front of the school. Helen Carter's husband, face pale. What's wrong? It's Doc Hayes. Heart attack, looks like. He's asking for you. Eliza didn't question it, just grabbed her shawl and followed him to the doctor's office. Inside, Hayes lay on his examination table, face gray, breathing labored. Ruth Cassidy was there, holding his hand. Miss Hartwell, Hayes managed. Sorry to bother you. Don't apologize. What do you need? Witness. For my will. Ruth's here. Need one more. Eliza took his other hand. Of course. Hayes dictated while Ruth wrote. Most of his estate to his sister in Colorado. Medical equipment to whoever took over his practice. Books to the school. Not much to leave, he said, voice weak. But the books, the children should have them. You'll make sure? I promise. He smiled slightly. Good teacher. Knew it when I met you. Stubborn. Smart. Won't let anyone push you around. Save your strength, Doc. For what? I'm dying, Miss Hartwell. Known it for months. Heart's been failing. Just wanted to last long enough to see if you'd stick. Glad you did. Tears blurred Eliza's vision. You should have told someone. We could have helped. Nothing to help. Old age and bad luck. But I'm not afraid. Lived a good life. Helped people. That's enough. He squeezed her hand once, then his grip loosened. His breathing slowed, steadied, then stopped. Ruth pressed her fingers to his neck, checking for a pulse. After a moment, she shook her head. He's gone. Eliza stood in the small office, holding the hand of a man she'd barely known, but who'd shown her kindness when she needed it most. The funeral was 2 days later. The whole town turned out, filling the small cemetery on the hill overlooking Silver Ridge. Hayes had been there 20 years, had delivered half the children in town, had set broken bones and treated fevers and sat with the dying. He'd mattered. People spoke. Stories of lives saved, kindnesses given, gruff advice that turned out to be right. Eliza listened and cried and realized something fundamental. This was what it meant to belong to a place. Not just living there, but being woven into its fabric. Mattering enough that your absence left a hole. After the service, Margaret Thornton approached her. Dr. Hayes left you his medical library, 37 books. I had them delivered to the school. That's too much. It's what he wanted. He admired you, Miss Hartwell, said you reminded him of his daughter, if he'd had one. Thornton's voice was softer than usual. Use them well. I will. That evening, Eliza unpacked the books. Medical texts, anatomy drawings, treatises on diseases and treatments. She arranged them carefully on the shelf, creating a small lending library within the school, knowledge that would outlive them all. She was organizing the last few volumes when someone knocked on the door. She opened it to find Caleb, hat in hand. Heard about Doc Hayes, wanted to check on you. I'm all right, sad, but all right. Mind if I come in? She stepped aside. Caleb entered, looking around the small room with its neat bed and single chair and shelf of books. You've made it home, he observed. I've tried. Succeeded, I'd say. He turned to face her. I also came because I wanted to talk to you about something. Been thinking about it for a while. Eliza's stomach tightened. All right. I'm getting older. Ranch is getting harder to manage alone. Been thinking about hiring permanent help, but that's not what I want. What I want is partnership. Someone who sees the place the way I do, who'll care about it. He paused, seeming to search for words. I'm not good at this. Talking about feelings, making speeches, but I've watched you these past months, and I see someone who's strong and smart and doesn't quit. Someone I respect, someone I trust. And I wondered if you might consider, if you'd think about... He stopped, frustrated with himself. Eliza's heart was pounding. Caleb, what are you asking? I'm asking if you'd marry me. Not now, not tomorrow, but eventually. When you're ready, if you're ever ready. The words came out in a rush. I know it's sudden. No, I'm not much of a catch, too old, too quiet, too set in my ways. But I can offer you stability, respect, partnership, and maybe, if I'm lucky, companionship. Eliza stared at him, utterly blindsided. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything yet. Think about it. Take your time. I just wanted you to know the option existed. He backed toward the door. I should go. Didn't mean to spring this on you. Caleb, wait. He stopped. Why me? Because you're you. Because you fight. Because when life knocks you down, you get back up. Because you make children want to learn, and you stand up to bullies, and you burn letters from men who don't deserve you. You saw that? Saw the smoke. Guessed the rest. He smiled slightly. I'm not asking you to love me, Eliza. I'm asking if you'd consider building a life with someone who sees your worth. The rest, maybe that comes later. Maybe it doesn't. But either way, you'd have a home, security, a partner. Then he was gone, leaving Eliza standing in the middle of her small room with her mind racing and her heart doing things she couldn't quite name. Marriage. To Caleb. It should have been terrifying, should have triggered every defense, every scar from Victor. But it didn't. Instead, it felt like possibility. She didn't sleep that night, just sat by the window watching the stars and turning the question over in her mind. Did she want to marry Caleb? Did she want to marry anyone? What did she actually want? The answer, when it came, was simple. She wanted to keep teaching, wanted to watch Sarah and William and Tom grow into whoever they were meant to be, wanted to build something that lasted, something that mattered. And maybe she wanted someone to build it with, someone who saw her clearly and liked what he saw, someone like Caleb. but there was time to decide. He'd said so himself. No pressure, no rush. Just possibility. Sitting quiet and patient, waiting for her answer. December came with unexpected snow, blanketing Silver Ridge in white that turned to mud by afternoon. Eliza stood at the schoolhouse window watching the children throw snowballs during recess, their laughter echoing across the empty street. She'd been thinking about Caleb's proposal for 3 weeks now, turning it over in her mind like a puzzle with pieces that almost fit but not quite. She hadn't given him an answer yet, hadn't seen him much either. He'd made himself scarce, giving her space. Martha had come to town twice for supplies, both times stopping by to chat about nothing in particular, but Eliza could see the questions in her eyes. The classroom door opened. Eliza turned, expecting one of the children coming in early from the cold. It was Victor. For a moment she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. He stood in the doorway exactly as she remembered him, tall, well-dressed, with that particular smile that used to make her feel special and now just made her feel sick. "Hello, Eliza." His voice was the same, smooth, confident, the voice that had once convinced her she was lucky to be loved by him. "What are you doing here?" Her own voice came out steadier than she felt. "I was in Santa Fe. Heard you were nearby. Thought I'd come to see how you were managing." He stepped inside, looking around the sparse classroom with barely concealed disdain. "So this is what you left me for? A one-room schoolhouse in the middle of nowhere. I didn't leave you for this. I left you because staying was killing me. Don't be dramatic. I was hard on you sometimes, yes, but only because I wanted you to be better, to reach your potential." The audacity of it nearly made her laugh. "My potential, according to whom? You?" "According to any reasonable standard." He moved closer. "Look at yourself, Eliza. You're wasting away out here. Teaching children who'll never amount to anything, living in poverty, pretending this is what you wanted." "It is what I wanted. Liar." The word was soft, almost gentle. "You wanted security, respect, a real position at a real school. I can still give you that. The offer in Santa Fe is genuine. Good salary, proper housing, a chance to teach students who actually matter." "Students who actually matter," Eliza repeated. "You mean wealthy students, white students, students whose parents have connections. Students with futures, yes. Every child has a future, Victor. You just can't see past your own prejudices to recognize it." His expression hardened. "I see you're still impossibly stubborn, still refusing to accept reality." "No, I'm finally seeing reality clearly, and you're not in it." "Because of him?" Victor's voice turned sharp. "The rancher who brought you here? Don't think I haven't heard the gossip. Small towns love to talk. Is he the reason you're playing at being a frontier schoolmarm? Caleb has nothing to do with this." "Caleb," Victor said the name like it tasted bad. "How provincial. Let me guess. He's offered to rescue you, marry you, give you his name, make you respectable. He's offered me partnership, respect, things you wouldn't understand." "Partnership," Victor laughed. "You mean he needs a housekeeper and you're desperate enough to accept?" The words hit exactly where he'd aimed them, at the soft place where her doubts lived, the part that still wondered if she was settling, if Caleb's proposal was really just practical necessity dressed up as something more. But then she looked at Victor's face, at the smugness there, the certainty that he was right and she was wrong, and something in her snapped. "Get out!" "Eliza, I said get out. You don't belong here. You have no right to come into my school, into my life, and tell me what I'm worth." "Someone needs to. You've clearly lost all perspective." "The only thing I've lost is my tolerance for your bullshit." The profanity felt good, sharp, and cleansing. "I spent 2 years believing I was the problem. Too big, too demanding, too much. And you know what I figured out? I'm not too much. You're just not enough." Victor's face flushed red. "You ungrateful—" "Miss Hartwell?" Tom Carter stood in the doorway, eyes wide, taking in the scene. Behind him, several other students had gathered, drawn by the raised voices. Eliza took a breath, forcing herself calm. "Yes, Tom?" "Recess is over. Should we come in?" "Give me 1 minute. Wait on the porch." The children retreated. Victor watched them go, then turned back to Eliza. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was wasting 2 years on you. Now leave before I have the sheriff remove you." For a moment, she thought he might refuse. Then he turned and walked out, shoulders rigid, radiating wounded dignity. Eliza waited until he was gone before letting herself shake. Her hands trembled as she smoothed her skirt, steadied her breathing. She felt violated somehow, like Victor's presence had contaminated the space she'd worked so hard to make safe. The children filed in, unusually quiet. They'd heard at least some of it. "Who was that?" Sarah asked. "Someone from my past. He's gone now." "He seemed mean." "He was. But he's not important. Let's get back to our lessons." She made it through the rest of the day on autopilot, teaching by rote while her mind spun. Victor had found her, had come here, to her school, her sanctuary, and tried to pull her back into his orbit, and she'd sent him away. The realization hit her as she was dismissing the children. She'd stood up to Victor, told him to leave. Meant it. She wasn't the same woman who'd let him define her worth. That evening, Ruth stopped by with dinner, stew and bread, claiming she'd made too much. They both knew it was an excuse to check on Eliza. "Heard Victor Pemberton was in town today?" Ruth said casually, ladling stew into bowls. "News travels fast. Always does." Tom Carter told his mother, who told Mrs. Fletcher, who told everyone else. Ruth set down a bowl in front of Eliza. "You want to talk about it?" "Not really." "Going to anyway?" Despite everything, Eliza smiled. "He wanted me to come to Santa Fe. Said I was wasting my time here." "What did you say?" "I told him to leave. Used language that would make my mother faint." Ruth laughed. "Good. Man sounds like a jackass." "He was. I just wish I'd seen it sooner." "We see things when we're ready, not before." Ruth ate a spoonful of stew. "So what now?" "I don't know. Keep teaching, I suppose. Try not to think about it." "And Caleb?" Eliza looked up sharply. "What about him?" "Don't play dumb. The whole town knows he asked you to marry him. Martha can't keep a secret to save her life." "He said I could take my time deciding." "That was before your ex-lover showed up to reclaim you." "Victor doesn't want me. He wants to win. There's a difference." "True. But the question remains, what do you want?" Eliza pushed stew around her bowl. "I want to keep teaching. Want my students to learn and grow. Want to matter." "You already do all that." "What else?" "I want—" She stopped, struggling to articulate something she'd barely admitted to herself. "I want to stop being afraid. Stop waiting for everything to fall apart. Stop thinking I don't deserve good things just because I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect, Eliza. And anyone who says otherwise is selling something. Caleb deserves someone who's sure. Someone who can say yes without hesitation. Or maybe he deserves someone real. Someone who knows what she's choosing because she's seen the alternative." Ruth reached across the table, squeezed Eliza's hand. "Talk to him. Be honest. See what happens." After Ruth left, Eliza sat in the growing darkness, thinking about honesty. About what she owed Caleb, what she owed herself. She rode out to the ranch the next morning, borrowing a horse from the livery. The ride gave her time to rehearse what she'd say, though the words kept slipping away. Caleb was mending fence when she arrived. He looked up, surprise crossing his face. "Eliza, didn't expect to see you. I needed to talk to you about your proposal, about everything." He set down his tools. "All right, let me just— Victor came to see me yesterday." Caleb went very still. "What did he want?" "The same thing he always wants. Control. He offered me a position in Santa Fe. Said I was wasting my time in Silver Ridge." "What did you tell him?" "I told him to leave. Told him I wasn't interested." Caleb nodded slowly. "Good. But seeing him made me realize something. I've been so focused on not making the same mistakes that I haven't been thinking clearly about what I actually want." "And what do you want?" Eliza dismounted, facing him across the half-mended fence. "I want to say yes to your proposal. But I need you to understand what you'd be getting. I'm not easy. I'm stubborn and opinionated, and I have scars that haven't healed. I might never be the partner you deserve." "Eliza, let me finish. I also need you to know that I can't give up teaching. It matters too much. And I need time to be sure. Time to trust this, time to believe I'm not making another mistake." Caleb listened, his expression unreadable. When she finally stopped talking, he said, "You done?" I think so. Good. Now it's my turn. He walked around the fence, stood in front of her. I'm not asking you to give up teaching. Never would. I'm not asking you to be perfect or easy or any of the things you think you should be. I'm asking if you want to build something with me. A partnership, like I said. You keep your work, I keep mine, and we support each other. That's it. But what if I can't? What if I'm not capable of what? Love. Maybe not today. Maybe not for a long time. I'm not asking for that. I'm asking if you trust me enough to try. Eliza felt tears threatening. I trust you more than I've trusted anyone in a long time, but that doesn't mean I'm ready to. Then don't be ready. Just be willing. That's enough. Is it? Really? Eliza, I was married before. I know what love looks like when it's new and easy. I also know what it looks like when it's tested and hard. What we have now, this honesty, this respect, that's a better foundation than most marriages start with. The rest we can figure out as we go. She wanted to believe him, wanted to think it could be that simple. I'm scared, she admitted. Me too. Sarah was the love of my life. I'm not looking to replace her, but I'm also not looking to spend the rest of my life alone. And if I'm going to share my life with someone, I'd want it to be someone who fights as hard as you do. For what it's worth, you're nothing like Victor. Caleb smiled slightly. That's probably the nicest thing you've ever said to me. I mean it. You see me. Really see me. Not who you want me to be, but who I am. That's rare. So is someone who stands in a schoolroom and tells off a man who spent years making her feel small. That took courage. It took anger. Sometimes those are the same thing. They stood there, the winter sun cold on their faces, the fence between them both literal and metaphorical. I can't give you an answer today, Eliza said finally. I need more time. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. She rode back to town feeling lighter somehow, like she'd set down a weight she'd been carrying without knowing it. The week before Christmas, Sarah Miller stopped coming to school. Eliza noticed her absence immediately. Sarah never missed class unless she was sick. After 3 days, she rode out to the Miller ranch, concerned. Ben Miller met her at the door, expression hostile. What do you want? Sarah hasn't been to school. I wanted to make sure she's all right. She's fine. Just done with school, like I said. But it's only December. The term runs through May. She's learned enough. Time for her to focus on useful skills. Behind him, Eliza caught a glimpse of Sarah in the house, looking miserable. Mr. Miller, Sarah is one of my best students. She has real potential. I don't care about potential. I care about reality. And the reality is, girls don't need fancy education. They need to know how to run a household. She can do both. Not in my house. He started to close the door. Wait. Eliza put her hand on the door frame. What if I spoke to the school board, arranged for Sarah to attend part-time, mornings only, so she could still help at home? I said no. Please, just think about it. She's too bright to pot. I said no. Miller's voice rose. Now get off my property before I make you. The door slammed in her face. Eliza rode back to town angry and helpless. She'd promised Sarah she'd help, but what could she do against a father's legal right to control his daughter's education? She went to the school board. Edward Brennan listened sympathetically but shook his head. Our hands are tied, Miss Hartwell. Parents have the right to withdraw their children. We can't force attendance. Even when it's clearly not in the child's best interest? Legally? Yes. I'm sorry. Eliza tried talking to Ruth, to Margaret Thornton, to anyone who might have influence with Ben Miller. No one would intervene. It wasn't done, they said. Parents' rights were sacred. Sarah's absence in the classroom was a hole that nothing could fill. The other students noticed, asked about her, but Eliza had no good answers. Christmas came and went, a quiet affair with Ruth's family and a small celebration at school where the children performed a play about the founding of Silver Ridge. Eliza smiled and applauded and tried not to think about the girl who should have been there. New Year arrived cold and bleak. Eliza was walking home from school one evening when she saw Sarah in town, helping her father load supplies. The girl looked thinner, tired, older somehow. Their eyes met across the street. Sarah's expression broke Eliza's heart, longing and resignation in equal measure. Eliza wanted to run over, to grab Sarah and shake some sense into Ben Miller, to do something, anything. But she just stood there, helpless and furious. That night, she wrote another letter to the school in Denver, explained the situation, asked if there were any legal recourses, any way to help a child whose father was limiting her future. The response came 3 weeks later. Nothing could be done without parental consent. However, if Sarah was ever able to leave on her own, at 18 or with her father's permission, scholarships might be available. 5 years. Sarah would have to wait 5 years for a chance at the education she deserved. Eliza folded the letter and put it in her desk drawer. She'd give it to Sarah when the time came, if the time came. In late January, another problem arrived. School enrollment was dropping, not drastically, but noticeably. 3 families had withdrawn their children in the past month, not for work reasons, but because of complaints about Eliza's teaching methods. Too progressive, they said. Too focused on thinking instead of memorization. Too willing to entertain questions that challenged traditional beliefs. Samuel Cooper summoned her to a council meeting. "We're hearing concerns," he said without preamble. "Parents say you're teaching inappropriate content, such as evolution, the age of the earth, questions about whether the Bible should be taken literally." Eliza kept her voice steady. "I'm teaching science, geology, biology, the theories that scientists currently accept as accurate. I'm not telling the children what to believe religiously. That's their family's concern. But I won't teach them that the earth is 6,000 years old when geological evidence suggests otherwise." Margaret Thornton spoke up. "You're putting parents in impossible positions. Children come home asking questions that undermine their faith. I'm teaching them to think critically. If their faith can't withstand questions, that's not my problem." "It becomes your problem when parents withdraw their children," Brennan said. "We need enrollment to justify keeping the school open." "So you want me to lie? Teach them falsehoods because the truth is uncomfortable?" "We want you to be sensitive to community values. And I want to prepare these children for a world that's bigger than Silver Ridge, a world where questions matter and evidence matters, and blind obedience to authority isn't enough." Cooper's face reddened. "That's exactly the kind of attitude that's causing problems. Then maybe you should find a teacher who's willing to keep these children ignorant, because I'm not that person." Silence. The council members exchanged glances. Finally, Ruth Cassidy said quietly, "May I suggest a compromise?" Everyone looked at her. "What if Miss Hartwell offered optional evening classes? For parents and children together. She could present the scientific theories, explain them, and families could decide for themselves what to believe. That way, no one feels ambushed, and the children still get exposed to important ideas." Brennan frowned. "Would parents actually attend? Some might. At least they'd feel included in their children's education rather than undermined by it." It wasn't ideal, but it was something. Eliza agreed, and the council voted to continue her contract on a provisional basis. She started the evening classes the following week. Attendance was sparse, maybe 6 families the first night, including Ruth and Daniel Cassidy, Helen Carter, and a few others. Eliza taught the same material she taught in school, but slower, with more explanation. She invited questions, welcomed skepticism, never told anyone they were wrong for believing differently. Slowly, more families started coming. Not all of them, probably never all of them, but enough to matter. And the children kept learning. It was March when everything fell apart. Eliza was cleaning the blackboard after school when she heard the commotion outside. Raised voices, the sound of a scuffle. She rushed out to find Victor in the street, face flushed, confronting Caleb. "You think you can steal her?" Victor was saying, voice slurred. He was drunk, Eliza realized with sinking dread. Drunk and furious. "Nobody's stealing anyone, Musson," Caleb said, his voice calm but his body tense. "You need to leave." "I need to leave? This is my concern. She's my—" "I'm not yours," Eliza said, stepping forward. "I was never yours." Victor spun to face her. "There she is, the ungrateful whore who—" He didn't finish the sentence. Caleb hit him, one clean punch that dropped Victor to the ground. People were gathering now, drawn by the noise. The sheriff was pushing through the crowd. "What's going on here?" "This man is drunk and disorderly," Caleb said. "He's been harassing Miss Hartwell." Victor climbed to his feet, wiping blood from his mouth. "Harassing? I came to talk to her. He attacked me." "After you called her a whore," someone in the crowd said. Tom Carter's voice. He did, another voice confirmed. I heard it. The sheriff looked at Victor with disgust. You got a place to stay? The hotel. Then go sleep it off. If I see you bothering Miss Hartwell again, you'll spend the night in jail. Victor's eyes found Eliza's. This isn't over. Yes, she said quietly. It is. He left, stumbling slightly, dignity in tatters. The crowd dispersed slowly, everyone talking at once. Eliza stood in the street feeling exposed, humiliated, angry. Caleb touched her arm gently. You okay? No, but I will be. Want me to stay? Make sure he doesn't come back? I want... She stopped, surprising herself with what came next. I want to say yes to your proposal. Not because of Victor, not because I need protection, but because I'm tired of being afraid, tired of waiting for permission to want things. Caleb studied her face. You sure? No, but I'm willing. That's what you said was enough, remember? I remember. Then yes, I'll marry you whenever you want, however you want. He smiled, the real smile, the one that reached his eyes and made him look younger. How about June? Gives us time to plan, time for you to finish the school year. June sounds perfect. He kissed her then, right there in the street with half the town watching. It was brief, almost chaste, but it felt like a claim, like a promise, like the beginning of something that might actually last. Word of the engagement spread through Silver Ridge like wildfire. By the next morning, everyone knew. Some congratulated Eliza with genuine warmth. Others whispered behind her back, wondering if she was marrying for security, if Caleb was settling, if the whole thing would fall apart by summer. Eliza tried not to care, tried to focus on her students, on lesson plans, on the small daily victories that made teaching worthwhile. But the gossip followed her like a shadow. Victor didn't leave town. That was the problem. He stayed at the hotel, making himself visible, sitting on the porch, drinking at the saloon, striking up conversations with anyone who'd listen. Always polite, always reasonable, always dropping little comments about Eliza's past. Known her for years, he'd say. Brilliant woman, but troubled. Unstable, really. I tried to help her, but she refused treatment. Or, teaching's admirable, of course, but between you and me, she's not quite right. Obsessive about control. It's sad, really. The lies were subtle enough that no one could pin them down. Insidious enough that they planted seeds of doubt. Helen Carter mentioned it to Eliza one afternoon after school. People are talking about Victor's version of your relationship. I don't believe him, but others might. Let them believe what they want. I know the truth. But your reputation, my reputation is built on 6 months of work, Helen. If people are willing to throw that away because of a drunk man's stories, then I was never going to win them over anyway. Still, the whispers wore on her. She found herself second-guessing interactions, wondering who believed Victor, who was just being polite to her face while judging her behind her back. Martha came to town in mid-March, ostensibly for supplies, but really to check on Eliza. Caleb says you're stressed. Caleb talks too much. Caleb worries, that's different. Martha poured tea with the same no-nonsense efficiency. She did everything. What's Victor after, really? To win. To prove he was right about me being nothing without him. To hurt me because I had the audacity to leave. Men like that are dangerous. I know, but what can I do? He hasn't broken any laws. He's just present, talking, slowly poisoning the well. Martha was quiet for a moment. You could leave. Come stay at the ranch until the wedding. Let him talk to an empty room. I won't be run out of my own home. That's pride talking. Maybe, but it's also principle. I've spent too much of my life running. I'm done. The confrontation Eliza had been dreading came on a Thursday afternoon in late March. She was walking back from the general store when Victor stepped out from an alley, blocking her path. We need to talk. No, we don't. Eliza, please, just 5 minutes. Against her better judgment, she stopped. Say what you need to say. I'm sorry for everything, for how I treated you, for coming here, for making things difficult. His voice was earnest, his eyes clear, no sign of the drunkenness from before. I've had time to think, and you were right. I didn't see you clearly, didn't appreciate what I had. Eliza waited. This felt like a trap. I'm leaving tomorrow, Victor continued, going back to Santa Fe.
But before I go, I wanted you to know that I understand now. You deserve better than how I treated you. You deserve happiness." "Thank you," Eliza said carefully. "I hope you find peace." "I hope you do too." He smiled, sad, resigned. "That rancher, he treats you well?" "Yes." "Good. That's good." He stepped back. "Goodbye, Eliza." He walked away, and Eliza stood there feeling unsettled. The apology had seemed genuine, but something about it felt wrong, too easy, too clean. She mentioned it to Caleb that evening when he came to town. "You think he meant it?" Caleb asked. "I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe he's just tired of fighting. Men like that don't get tired. They regroup." "Then what do I do?" "Stay alert. Don't trust him, and let me know if he approaches you again." But Victor didn't approach her. He checked out of the hotel the next morning, loaded his belongings onto the stage, and left. Eliza watched the coach disappear and felt something unclench in her chest. Maybe he had meant it. Maybe he really was letting go. She should have known better. 2 weeks later, on the first Saturday in April, Silver Ridge held its spring market. Vendors from surrounding towns, farmers selling produce, craftsmen selling goods. The whole town turned out. The street transformed into a bustling fair. Eliza was helping Ruth at her husband's carpentry booth when she heard the commotion, raised voices, the crowd shifting and parting. She looked up to see Victor in the center of the street, standing on an overturned crate like a preacher. He wasn't drunk this time, wasn't disheveled or angry. He was calm, articulate, and clearly performing for an audience. "I appreciate you all listening," he was saying. "I know I'm a stranger here, but I felt I had a moral obligation to speak up before this community makes a terrible mistake." Eliza's stomach dropped. She started moving toward him, but Caleb was faster, appearing from somewhere in the crowd. "Miss Hartwell," Victor continued, spotting her, "has presented herself as a victim, as someone fleeing an abusive relationship, and I understand why. It's easier than admitting the truth." "That's enough," Caleb said, his voice carrying across the crowd. "The truth is," Victor pressed on, "Eliza has a history of instability, of emotional outbursts, of making accusations when she doesn't get her way. I tried to help her, gave her opportunities, supported her career, and when I couldn't accept her increasingly erratic behavior, she left and blamed me for her failures." "You're lying," Eliza said, her voice shaking with rage. "Am I? Then explain why you were let go from the Fairmont Academy, why you've jumped from town to town, position to position, why you've isolated yourself out here where no one knows your past." The crowd was listening, faces uncertain. Some looked at Eliza with new suspicion. "I left Fairmont because of you," Eliza said, "because you made it impossible to stay. And I came here because I wanted a fresh start, not because I was running from anything." "Is that what you tell yourself?" Victor's voice was gentle, pitying. "I'm not here to hurt you, Eliza. I'm here because I'm worried about you, about this town, about the children in your care." "The children are fine," Margaret Thornton's voice cut through the crowd. She stepped forward, her expression fierce. "My grandson's reading has improved 3 grade levels since Miss Hartwell started teaching. That's not the work of an unstable woman." "With respect, ma'am, you're not a medical professional. You don't know the signs." "I know what I see," Thornton interrupted. "I see a dedicated teacher who's transformed our school. And I see a bitter man trying to destroy her because she had the strength to leave him." Ruth spoke up next. "Miss Hartwell has been nothing but professional and kind since she arrived. Whatever happened between you two in the past, it's clear who the problem was." Other voices joined in. Helen Carter defending Eliza's character, Daniel Cassidy vouching for her integrity. Even Tom Carter, his young voice breaking with emotion, talking about how Eliza had saved him when he ran away. Victor's confident expression began to crack. This wasn't going how he'd planned. Then Caleb spoke, his voice quiet but absolute. "You need to leave now, before this gets ugly." "I have every right to be here." "You have the right to leave under your own power or be escorted out by the sheriff. Those are your options." The sheriff, who'd been watching from the edge of the crowd, stepped forward. "He's right. You've said your piece. Time to go." Victor looked around at the hostile faces, the community that had closed ranks around Eliza. For a moment, she saw real rage in his eyes, the mask dropping, revealing the man underneath.
"You'll regret this," he said to Eliza. "All of you. When she shows her true colors, remember I warned you." "The only thing I regret," Eliza said, her voice steady now, "is wasting 2 years believing your lies about me. But I don't anymore. I know what I'm worth, Victor. And it's not measured by your approval." She turned her back on him, the most dismissive gesture she could make, and walked away. The crowd parted for her, and she could feel their support like a physical thing. Behind her, she heard the sheriff telling Victor to get on his horse and leave, heard Victor's protests, then the sound of hoofbeats retreating. She kept walking until she reached the schoolhouse, sat down on the steps, hands shaking, adrenaline crashing. Caleb found her there a few minutes later. He sat beside her, not speaking, just present. "He'll come back," Eliza said finally. "Men like that always do." "Maybe. But if he does, he'll find a town that won't listen." "You saw them, Eliza. They chose you." "Some of them, not all. Enough of them, the ones who matter." She leaned against him, letting herself be held. "I'm tired, Caleb. Tired of fighting. Tired of proving myself over and over." "I know, but you don't have to fight alone anymore." That night, Eliza couldn't sleep. She kept replaying Victor's words, the faces in the crowd, the moment when the town had defended her. Part of her was grateful. Another part was terrified, because if they could believe in her this easily, they could turn on her just as fast. She was sitting by the window watching the stars when she heard something outside. Footsteps. The creak of the porch. Fear shot through her. Victor. He'd come back. She grabbed the fire poker from beside the stove, moved quietly to the door. The knock was soft. "Miss Hartwell? It's Sarah. Sarah Miller." Eliza opened the door. Sarah stood there in a nightgown and shawl, face pale in the moonlight. "Sarah? What are you doing here? Does your father know?" "He's asleep. Please, I need to talk to you." Eliza pulled her inside, closed the door. "What's wrong?" Sarah's words came in a rush. "I heard what happened today, with that man, and I realized I've been so scared. Scared to speak up, scared to fight for what I want. But you did. You stood there and told everyone the truth, even though it was hard. And I thought, if you can do that, maybe I can too." "Sarah, what are you talking about? I want to keep learning. I know Pa won't let me come back to school, but I'll do anything. Clean for you, help with younger students, whatever you need. Just please don't let me lose this. Education is the only thing I have." Eliza's heart broke and swelled simultaneously. "Sit down. Let me think." She made tea, bought time while her mind raced. Sarah couldn't stay here. That would cause a scandal. But sending her home meant giving up. "What if," Eliza said slowly, "we arranged for you to help at the school? Not as a student, but as an assistant. You'd help with the younger children, clean the schoolhouse, organize materials. In exchange, I'd give you books to read at home, assignments to complete. Your father couldn't object to you working, could he?" Sarah's face lit up. "Do you think he'd allow it?" "I think if I presented it as you earning money and learning practical skills, he might. Let me talk to him." "When?" "Tomorrow. First thing. Now go home before he wakes up and finds you gone." Sarah hugged her, quick and fierce, then slipped back out into the night. Eliza sat in the dark, wondering if she'd just made a promise she couldn't keep. The next morning, she rode out to the Miller ranch. Ben was in the barn, mucking stalls. "Mr. Miller, I'd like to offer Sarah a position." He looked up, suspicious. "What kind of position?" "Assistant at the school. She'd help with the younger children, keep the schoolhouse clean, organize materials. It would teach her responsibility and practical skills. I'd pay her 50 cents a week." 50 cents? His expression shifted from suspicious to interested. "For cleaning?" "And helping manage the children. She's good with them. Patient. I need the help, and she needs the experience." Ben considered. "She'd be home by 3? Every day. And no more of this advanced learning nonsense? Just practical work?" Eliza swallowed her frustration. "Just practical work." "All right, she can start Monday." Relief flooded through her. "Thank you, Mr. Miller." Sarah started the following week. To the outside world, she was just helping out. But Eliza gave her books to read, problems to solve, essays to write. They worked in stolen moments before school started, during lunch, after the other children left. It wasn't ideal, but it was something. and Sarah absorbed everything like she was starving. April melted into May. The wedding was 6 weeks away, and Eliza should have been excited, should have been planning and preparing and feeling joy. Instead, she felt numb, going through motions. Martha noticed. She'd come to town to help with wedding preparations and found Eliza staring at fabric samples without seeing them. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. I'm fine." "You're a terrible liar. Talk to me." Eliza set down the fabric. "What if I'm making a mistake? What if I'm just trading one form of dependence for another? You think Caleb's like Victor?" "No. But what if I'm still that same woman who needed saving? What if I haven't actually changed?" Martha was quiet for a moment. "You know what I think? I think you're scared, and that's normal. Marriage is terrifying even when it's right, but you're not the woman Caleb pulled out of that dust. That woman couldn't have stood up to Victor, couldn't have built what you've built here." "Then why do I still feel like her?" "Because growth isn't linear. Some days you'll feel strong. Some days you'll feel broken. That's being human, not being weak." "What if I can't be what Caleb needs?" "What if he can't be what you need?" Works both ways, Eliza. Marriage is two people choosing each other every day, flaws and all. It's not about being perfect. It's about being willing. The conversation helped. Not completely, but enough. 2 weeks before the wedding, Victor came back. He rode into town just before dawn, before most people were awake, went straight to the schoolhouse, broke down the door. Eliza woke to the sound of splintering wood. She scrambled out of bed, heart hammering, and grabbed the first thing she could reach, a heavy candlestick. Victor stood in her doorway, silhouetted against the pre-dawn light. He wasn't drunk, wasn't disheveled. He was cold, focused, and terrifying. "You ruined me," he said conversationally. "Did you know that? The school in Santa Fe heard about our situation. They withdrew their offer, said they couldn't employ someone involved in a scandal. That's not my fault. Isn't it? You could have kept quiet, could have let me go with dignity. Instead, you had to make a scene, had to turn everyone against me." "I told the truth, that's all." "The truth?" He laughed. "Your truth. Your version. What about mine?" He stepped into the room. Eliza backed up, clutching the candlestick. "Don't come any closer." "Or what? You'll hit me? Go ahead, prove me right. Prove you're exactly as unstable as I said." "I'm not unstable. I'm done being your victim." "You were never a victim, Eliza. You were a willing participant. You let me define you because you were too weak to define yourself." Something inside her snapped, not into pieces, into clarity. "You're right," she said. "I did let you define me. I believed your lies because it was easier than facing my own fear. But that's over now. I know who I am. And I know you're here because you can't stand that I'm happy without you." Victor's face twisted. "Happy? You're marrying a rancher twice your age because you're desperate. You're teaching in a school that barely exists. You call that happy?" "Yes, because it's mine. I chose it, and you have no power over it." She saw the moment he decided to hurt her, saw his hand move toward her. She swung the candlestick. It connected with his shoulder, not his head. She wasn't trying to kill him. And he stumbled back with a roar of pain and rage. "You crazy!" The door burst open. Caleb was there, and behind him the sheriff and half a dozen townsmen. Someone must have seen Victor ride in, must have alerted them. Victor spun, wild-eyed. "She attacked me! You all saw—" "We saw you break into her home," the sheriff said. "That's trespassing at minimum, probably attempted assault." "I just wanted to talk—" "By breaking down her door before dawn?" Caleb's voice was deadly quiet. "Try again." The sheriff grabbed Victor's arms, pulled them behind his back. "You're under arrest, and after that you're banned from this town. If I see you here again, it'll be a lot worse than jail." They dragged him out, still protesting. The other men followed, leaving Caleb and Eliza alone. Eliza was shaking so hard she could barely stand. Caleb crossed the room, took the candlestick from her hands, set it down gently. "You all right?" "I hit him." "Good. I could have killed him." "But you didn't. You defended yourself. That's different." She looked up at him. "I'm not afraid anymore. That's the strange part. I thought I would be, but I'm just tired. Tired of him having any space in my life at all." "Then let's make sure he doesn't. We'll fix your door, get the sheriff to file formal charges, make it clear he's not welcome here. And if he comes back anyway, Then we deal with it. Together. The word settled something in her. Together. Not alone. Not dependent. Together. The trial was brief. Victor was charged with trespassing and attempted assault. He denied everything, claimed Eliza had invited him in, that the whole thing was a misunderstanding. But the broken door told a different story. And the testimony of a dozen townspeople who'd heard him threatening Eliza over the past months told another. He was sentenced to 30 days in jail and permanent banishment from Silver Ridge. After serving his time, he'd be escorted to the county line with a warning that returning meant more serious charges. Eliza sat through the sentencing feeling nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, just relief. It was over. The wedding was planned for the first Saturday in June, at the ranch under open sky. Simple, small, just close friends and family. Eliza woke that morning with butterflies in her stomach, but no doubts. She dressed in the blue dress Ruth had helped her make. Nothing fancy, just simple cotton that fit well and made her feel like herself. Martha helped with her hair, pinning it up in a style that was neat without being fussy. "Nervous?" Martha asked. "Terrified." "Good. Shows you're paying attention." The ceremony was brief. Just a few words from a circuit preacher who happened to be passing through, vows exchanged under the wide New Mexico sky. Caleb looked uncomfortable in his Sunday clothes, but his eyes were steady when he said, "I do." Eliza's voice shook on her own vows, but she got through them. And then it was done. She was married. She was Eliza Monroe. The celebration afterward was simple: food, music, dancing. The children from school were there, running wild across the ranch, their laughter echoing. Sarah sat with Eliza for a while, telling her about the books she'd been reading. "I'm going to be like you someday," Sarah said. "A teacher. Someone who helps people see what they're capable of." "You'll be better than me," Eliza said, "because you'll start from what I've learned. That's how progress works." As the sun set, painting the desert in shades of orange and pink, Eliza stood with Caleb looking out at the land that was now hers too. "Any regrets?" he asked. "About marrying you? No. About the path that got me here? Some. But I'm learning to live with them. That's all any of us can do." "Is it enough? Just living with our mistakes?" "I think so. As long as we learn from them. As long as we keep trying to be better." Eliza thought about the woman who'd been thrown from that stagecoach nearly a year ago. The woman who'd believed she was worthless, who'd let someone else define her value. That woman was gone. Not erased, her scars remained, but transformed. Tempered by struggle into something stronger. "I'm going to keep teaching," she said. "Even now, even married. I need you to know that's not negotiable. I know, wouldn't have it any other way. And I'm going to keep fighting for students like Sarah, keep pushing boundaries, keep making people uncomfortable." "Good. World needs more people who make others uncomfortable. Comfortable people never change anything." She leaned against him, letting herself be held without feeling diminished by it. This was partnership. This was choosing each other without surrendering yourself. This was what love could look like when it was built on respect instead of need. Years passed. The school grew. Eliza fought with the town council regularly, but won more battles than she lost. She started a lending library, then pushed for a proper building. She brought in new textbooks, new teaching methods, new ideas that scandalized half the town and inspired the other half. Sarah Miller did leave eventually, at 18 with a scholarship to that school in Denver. She wrote letters, came back to visit, eventually became a teacher herself. Other students followed. Tom Carter became a lawyer. William Thornton started a newspaper. Lucy, the tiny 5-year-old, grew up to run for town council. The seeds Eliza planted grew in ways she never could have predicted. She and Caleb never had children of their own. They talked about it, decided together that their lives were full enough without them. The ranch thrived. They took in strays, people who needed a fresh start, who needed somewhere to belong. The house Martha once kept became a refuge for those rebuilding broken lives. Eliza never forgot what it felt like to be thrown in the dust, never forgot the terror of believing she was worthless. She kept those memories sharp and painful and useful, wielding them like tools to help others see their own worth. On her 50th birthday, the town threw her a celebration. The school was named after her, officially, permanently. Students she'd taught decades ago showed up with their own children, telling stories about lessons learned. Margaret Thornton, now in her 80s, stood and gave a speech.
I didn't like Eliza Hartwell when she arrived, she said bluntly. Thought she was too soft, too educated, too much. I was wrong about all of it. She wasn't too much. We were too little, too small in our thinking, too afraid of change. She showed us what was possible, not just for our children, but for ourselves. She taught us that growth is painful and necessary, that comfort is the enemy of progress, that the people we write off might be exactly who we need.
Eliza listened with tears in her eyes, thinking about how far she'd come. From that woman in the dust to this, standing in a room full of people who saw her, truly saw her, and chose to celebrate what they found. Later, at home, Caleb found her on the porch, watching the sunset. Happy birthday. Thank you. Any regrets? It was the question he'd asked on their wedding day, on countless days since, and her answer had changed over the years, evolved as she had. I regret the time I wasted believing I was less than I was, but I don't regret the journey that brought me here, even the painful parts, especially the painful parts. Why especially those? Because they taught me the most important lesson, that I'm not defined by what breaks me. I'm defined by how I choose to rebuild. She took his hand, holding it in the fading light.
I was thrown in the dust, she said quietly, and I could have stayed there, could have believed I belonged there. But I got up, and that choice, that one choice, changed everything. Caleb squeezed her hand. You didn't just get up, you rose. We rose. Together. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their separate pasts and built something that lasted. Not perfect, never perfect, but real and chosen, and worth every struggle it took to get there. The frontier didn't care about perfection. It cared about survival, about adaptation, about refusing to quit when quitting was easier. Eliza had mastered all three. And in doing so, she'd proven something Victor never understood, that worth isn't assigned by others, it's claimed by yourself. And once you claim it, truly claim it, no one can take it away. She'd been thrown in the dust, but she'd risen from it stronger than anyone imagined possible, and that was the only truth that mattered.